Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission for Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. I'd like to open the meeting at 7:30. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Carpenter, Mr. Fitzer, Mr. Colber,
Present.
Mr. Kucera,
Here.
Mr. Nushai,
Here.
Ms. Redmond,
Here.
Mr. Scott, Mr. Solomon,
Here.
Mr. Titman.
Here.
Thank you.
We do have a quorum. Agenda item number 4 is approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any problems with the agenda standing in front of us? As it is, no problems. I will therefore approve it as is. Agenda item number 5 is approval of the regular meeting minutes from December 12th, 2023, our last meeting.
I move to approve the meeting minutes of December 12th, 2023.
Support.
Motion support. Anybody have any changes, corrections? Seeing none, I'll take roll call, please.
Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai, Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin,
Yes.
Mr. Colber.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is public discussion for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone here from the public wishing to speak?
I'll wait and handle whatever we gotta handle when.
Okay. All right, therefore, I will then close public discussion, and we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is a site plan application for 1 East 14 Mile Road, which is the Grand River Brewery facade improvements. And will Mr. Tangeri walk us through this?
Yep. I've got some images that I can throw up on the screen if we want to look at anything. I think everybody knows which building this is. I have an old photo in the site plan review, but it's right at the corner of Main and 14 Mile. It's probably one of the foremost visible sites in the city. Let's put it that way. So we're looking at really two parts of it. We're looking at a small portion of the south wall that faces 14 Mile and a wall in the back of the building by the alley that faces west into the little alcove there where their rear entrance is. So the two things that they're looking for are they've got some windows on the south facade, and there's like a knee wall there right now. And they want to take out the knee wall and put in a roll-up door. And what that roll-up door would do is provide access to the outdoor dining area when it's set up, and they would also be able to leave that open on a warm day to get some air circulation into the restaurant. And then the other thing is this mural, which I put an image of it right in your the review letter. And again, that's on that west-facing wall behind their main entrance, and then fairway tile and carpet. I put a photo on the last page of the memo of the alcove area, just pointing to the wall that it's going to be on so that you can see that, like, which one it is. So there's a wall where the door is that faces out to the alley. Then you've got the wall where the jewelry store's rear entrance is. And then across from that, there's a kind of blank wall with some utilities on it. So the couple things that we look at when we're looking at murals, limiting the commercial message to no more than 25% of the total mural area, that standard's met. Mural complements the building's colors and aesthetics, so you can, of course, discuss that. This is in that nook in the back. It's not particularly visible from a lot of angles. You actually have to really kind of be in the alley to even see that it's there. And the context of the mural is, of course, that space. So if it was on the front of the building, we'd be probably having a different conversation because the front of the building has a pretty different appearance than that little alcove in the back. And then finally, the mural is considered to be a public benefit, i.e. art, which couldn't be achieved using the standard wall signage requirements. This, of course, it takes up the whole wall. It's quite a bit larger than you could do with a wall sign. It wouldn't be achievable under the standard wall signage requirements. Anybody have any questions or comments for me, and then we can go to the applicant?
I know we had a discussion a few years ago about murals and the standard around that. Does the Downtown Development Authority ever establish some more standards around content? Remember we had that discussion,
From what
Joe?
I understand, they're working on it, but they have not actually established anything
Okay.
at this point. Yeah, they're trying to get a mural program together, but they haven't pulled it all together at this
All
point.
right.
I was kind of surprised that we're looking at approving a wall mural which is already in existence. I had dinner there yesterday. This is already painted. This is done. This is up. And for the door in the front, I didn't look at it closely, but as I drove by today, it's blacked out from the outside, so I don't know if the construction's already been started in that or not. So it seems a little bit odd to me that before seeking approval, these items already been done. I have no problem personally with the mural. I think it's a great location because it's not, like you said, it's not seen by public most.
Sure.
If you're entering their back door, which majority of people do, it's good, and it does fit in. It's not outrageous as far as I'm concerned. I'm just surprised that it's already done before the request
Sure.
came in front
Yeah,
of us.
I think Nick wants to address that, actually.
Yeah, so I think when they were going to occupy the space, there might have been just a little bit of lapse of communication on what their intent was and what our guidelines were for the city. And so I had a similar instance when I was going to get dinner there when they first opened and noticed that they were painting the mural and wasn't aware of that. And so spoke to the manager there, and then Joel, who's the contractor, who will be up here in a minute, and kind of explain the guidelines of what needs to happen. And so at that point, the mural was nearing completion, and instead of stopping them, allowed it to complete, and then have that be part of the application with the garage door, just so you have the opportunity to see it. And if the desire was to not approve the mural, certainly would just paint over it. But still wanted to follow through the proper protocol, even though it's a little bit backwards, but just to make sure we're following the ordinance that we've in place.
Are we making businesses aware of this fact that we would like to see the mural before it's painted? I mean, White Wolf, or the pastry place here in town, they were in front of us 2 or 3 times, I think, with their drawings, and before we approved that, and it came out really nice. It's fine.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're trying to work on and as the DDA is doing it, it's the primary area where it's going to see public art because there's more foot traffic there.
Right.
And so as they're working on developing their guidelines, we'll certainly review them when it comes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So just to follow up, so in the future, if we do have a mural program and potentially a board that kind of goes with that, or a committee, I guess, will murals come in front of the planning commission? Will they still need for approval? Or what cases would we see that? I'm just kind of curious how that process
so-
works. It's outside of the scope of today, sorry, but it's more
No,
just
it's
general.
relevant.
Yeah.
It's a good question. So if the DDA develops something, whatever they develop will apply only in the DDA boundaries. So if you had someone wanting to do a mural, say down in the Westgate district, it would still come here. And then in the downtown, it really depends on how it's developed and implemented. It could be a process whereby a board of the DDA simply approves murals in the DDA and it's done. Or it could be a 2-stage thing where they look at it and then it comes to the planning commission. It kind of depends on how it gets developed. And I don't really know where they are in the process right now
Yeah.
as far as their development of their process. I think they're probably thinking that it's going to be a board of the DDA that handles those approvals. But of course, that's all ultimately got to be implemented, and the planning commission has to be part of the implementation of that.
Yeah, some
So-
section of the city's going to have to keep an eye on, because I think it was Berkeley or some other city had a lawsuit a couple of years ago. They painted a wall, and it was, I think, Venus coming out of the oyster shell or something. It
Okay.
was like nude, somewhat considered nudity. I think she was topless or something. And I think they went to court on it, and they had to paint over it and change it up. So somebody's going to have to look at this stuff to approve it, I think, before we just,
Sure,
we're not
yeah,
allowing just anybody to paint anything on it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of murals around town and
Yeah.
public art, of course, but yeah, we gotta, maybe we should just kind of take that as a takeaway for
Yeah.
how do we decide, besides just boundary limits? Like,
Right.
do we have a seat, someone in the planning commission have a seat on that committee, or,
That is
what's the
one
best
potential way to
process?
handle it, is that you, you have a liaison to that,
Okay.
to that mural approval board, and then that PC member can report out to the planning commission. Okay, we got another mural coming into the DDA, and this is what it looks like, and this was what the decision was.
So Joe, in terms of murals, like, again, I don't have a problem with this one. Actually, I'm like, I wonder why they chose that wall instead of one that was more parking lot facing, but really, does it fit I don't know, our mural standards?
I think it
quite?
does, yeah, I mean.
It doesn't seem
in
to
my
be.
opinion, it does, I guess.
Right, and typically, I mean, a Westgate mural would be much different than.
Yeah, I mean, you'd
yeah.
be working with just a different type of physical environment. It's going to be differently visible, different sized walls. Yeah, it's going to be pretty different.
And I didn't see anything that kind of spelled out the roll doors.
We don't have anything that really speaks to them. Really, what the downtown design guidelines say is that you need to have a certain amount of transparency between 2 and 8 feet on your main facade. And this literally does not change the amount of transparency on the facade. There's a window there now. They're just going to be bringing the door all the way down to the ground and getting rid of the knee wall that's below the windows right now. So it's really not, it's not changing the facade very substantially, really.
Right, and I mean, it doesn't, it's essentially like a garage door that rolls
Right.
up. I guess I don't see any issues with
I mean-
that type of proposal. It only adds, like you said, more transparency.
Right.
And I think it does help to generate that look and feel of what we're trying to establish of people, and pedestrians as one.
Would agree with that,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that, our ordinance literally says adding a door to a facade triggers site plan. So that's really why they're here for that. But yeah, I think that it is very much in line with the purpose of the downtown.
One other question, looking at your photo here showing the murals on the west-facing wall, this comes to mind to me is that as you enter their building, you can see the doorway in the center, that's where you're going in.
Mm-hmm.
Do they own that wall, or is that wall part of Fairway Carpet and Tile?
Well, it is part of Fairway Carpet and Tile. However, we have a signed letter from the landlord approving that location for the
Good,
mural.
because we've run into that problem before with somebody painting a wall in town. They did a beautiful job on it, and then they were told, you can't do that because it's not your building, you're not a...
Oh, sure, right, yeah.
Yeah.
No, in this case, we do have a letter of permission.
Okay, so we're good on that.
file.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Joe then? Would the applicant like to speak to us?
Yeah, just real quick. I'm Joel Morris. I actually built Pumachug the first time, which was a nice peaceful environment because there was no one else around during that time. We had a window permit pulled for the glass in the door. So what we did on that front facade was that was original old single pane glass, like siliconed in, and on a stiff wind, you could almost, sitting inside, you could feel the breeze. It would almost feel like it was coming in, yeah. So we replaced it with the exact same existing new storefront. So John, the owner of Fairway Tile, owns the building. So they own that building as well. So that's when he said he gave approval for the mural there. He's like, yeah, it's my building, no big deal, right?
Okay.
So they put that mural on that wall, speaking to your comment, because of all the mechanical gears or all the mechanicals there. They kind of painted it into making it look like it was part of, like the beer piping
it
and all
now.
that.
Now
yeah.
I see it. I like it.
Yeah.
It's
So they
creative.
kind of worked it all into their gear theming
fun,
and everything
yeah.
there. So I really didn't know about the mural until we had our gal there starting on the mural, and I spoke with Nick, and we just kind of were like, you know what, let's put it all together here. So, also speaking to that garage door, the foundation on the front of that building is original, and it was in pretty poor shape. So when we took that two sides out, we replaced both the glass. Two brand new doors are on either side. I mean, it was just crumbling. So, I mean, it was disintegrating pretty much. So when we took that whole centerpiece glass out, we just blanked it all off and covered it until, you know, we got after this meeting here, and we haven't done anything since until we got, you know, the blessing from everybody on the garage doors, and then we're going to move forward after the fact. But we just, you know, replaced the glass, got our permit for that. And I assumed because it was a door and it was glass that it might have been incorporated in that. But then, you know, Nick and I clarified everything on the fact that we had to, you know, go in front of the board for approval on that. So and that's kind of where we're at now. So
I think it's a good addition, because White Wolf is putting in doors like this for their patio, I believe.
yeah, I believe they are too. And we have one over at the Snug too.
Detroit
So I
Burger
guess
Bar,
the Snug.
they have opening doors for their patios. I think it's a good little addition to the restaurants.
And moving forward, we also have some art coming in for Gus's Snug as well. So we'll, you know, speaking to that, I had already showed Nick some renderings of what we have, and I guess you guys will be able to put eyes on that as well for the two sides of the building there. So it'll be up in front of the board before we do anything moving forward over on that corner. So.
You're talking artwork on Gus's? Or?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
So it's I can give you a quick insight. It's a giant Guinness toucan, and then the other one is a picture of St. James Gate, and they're original Guinness renderings, like vintage renderings that are just kind of look cool. So it doesn't say anything about Gus's Snug. It just says, you know, it's kind of tells you what's going on there. So
Oh, good. We'll see pictures before you start painting them.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So
All right, does anyone else have any questions or comments? I guess
All right.
we're all good. then.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion then.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve 1 East 14 Mile as laid out, as stated.
Support.
Motion and support. No further comments. I'll take roll call, please.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin,
Yes.
Mr. Colburn, Mr. Cusero,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai.
Yes.
Ms. Redmond.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 8 is the master plan discussion, 14 Mile Road and main corridors.
Yep, we're gonna continue on a little bit from last meeting. Let me share my screen for a moment.
And just while we do that, I just want to say thank you, because I know we asked for additional photos and things, so
Yeah.
for this last site plan, I know you guys went out there and took pictures or found pictures, so helpful, obviously. It's close by, it's easy to look at, but it's nice just to have everything spelled out.
The Gus's Snug art will be on the next agenda.
Alrighty. So talking about principal corridors again, we just wanted to kind of remind you of the purpose of the modules that we are presenting in front of you as part of the master plan update. We just want to mostly give you a lot of content to think about, and then kind of get your minds churning on these topics, and then be able to relay any kind of thoughts you have about these corridors back to us, so that we can then start to draft content for the plan in terms of policy direction and whatnot. So we are going to, in the memo, we really asked a bunch of questions at the end. I hope you were able to see some of those on that page 5 of the memo, the Planning Commission considerations. So we really want to know what kind of weaknesses you see in the current development patterns that are occurring on these corridors. That's obviously the North Main, South Main, West 14, and East 14 Mile corridors. We want to know what kind of positive elements you think are currently serving as foundations for the positive evolution of the corridor. We want to know what kind of intensity of development, that is height, setback, massing, number of dwelling units, et cetera. What kind of intensity you would want in these corridors. Maybe, I know Commissioner Carpenter, who's not here, suggested that, potentially you start with a similar pattern as downtown, but you kind of scale out as you move outward. Don't really know if that's the consensus, but I think those are good considerations to discuss tonight. Talking about parking a little bit, there is some on-street parking along the South Main corridor, that is. There's kind of thoughts to bring a little bit more into play. So just getting your thoughts on allowing for a little bit more parking flexibility if there is on-street parking, or if there are larger lots nearby that may serve different shared parking uses. We want to talk about housing a little bit too. Missing middle, especially in some areas. So missing middle is the housing such as duplexes to triplexes to fourplexes. It really matters on context. I think in a small to mid-sized city, I think duplex to fourplexes is a good missing middle context. In New York City, when they say missing middle, that can be up to 20 unit housing. So for you all, I think missing middle is kind of that 2 to 4 unit housing strategies that different communities are trying to adopt these days.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah, of course.
Do you have an ideal of like how many bedrooms those quadplexes might have?
Generally, I don't really know how much that's being considered. I think that's mostly left to a developer to be able to try to probably think about the community they're locating in. So maybe Clawson having a little bit more families in general than like young. And I guess I don't even know the statistics off the top of my head, but maybe a place that wants more families might want maybe 2 to 3 bedroom units rather than
Yeah, I guess I just don't know how
a lot
you-
of efficiencies. You know what I mean? So,
Right, which, yeah, obviously is something builders look for efficiencies because that's where the money's at. But
Yeah.
like, when I think of the generic term of missing middle, it would be 2 to 3 bedroom units,
Yeah.
and ways we can encourage that. And I would think that like if it was a duplex quad, it would essentially be a 2+ bedroom. It's not going to be a studio and a
Yeah.
quad. But if there's ways we can kind of encourage a 3-bed plus type
yeah.
unit, because I truly believe we've got plenty of efficiencies, plenty of 1 bedrooms,
Yeah.
plenty of 2. I don't feel like that fits the definition of a missing anything.
Yeah. I think that's
but-
good to hear.
Yeah.
That kind of content. So thanks for
Okay.
that. I think we can talk about that kind of when we get into maybe the East 14-mile corridor, which is probably the most like missing middle potential for any of these corridors, just because it's a little less developed in general.
The northeast or just east in general?
East 14-mile
Okay.
corridor.
Okay.
There's a lot of current residential there, and I'll get to it in the
Okay.
PowerPoint, so maybe
Yeah.
we can talk about it a little further then. And generally, we just want to see what your thoughts are on future redevelopment. If the Planning Commission interested in kind of creating more like of the complete neighborhood, so neighborhoods that might provide groceries and services in a walking distance, medical appointments, even more jobs, those kinds of complete neighborhoods, so that there's a little less reliance on the car. There's a little bit less contribution towards traffic and towards different kinds of chaotic parking scenarios per se. So we want to hear kind of these type of questions you might have in that context as we roll through these slides.
And I just have one comment.
Yep.
I appreciate the thought starters, and I personally have opinions. I'm sure everybody here has opinions.
Yep.
But I never got results from the survey. And I'm not sure if you guys were going to address that, just because a lot of these
Yeah.
questions that you posed, we also asked residents. So I'd love to have their feedback in terms of, we talked about housing, we talked about parking.
Yeah.
Those were all questions that I think we had in the survey. So is there a way that we're going to either
Yeah.
send that out to this committee and also residents who signed up? And I
Yeah.
apologize, because I sent an email to you, Nick, I think like an hour before this meeting started, so it's a
Okay.
little last minute. But we, maybe for next meeting or next time we
Yeah.
talk about master plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to provide my personal feelings and everything,
It's
but,
looking like a short meeting, next meeting, so I'm sure we can include that as part of the conversation.
okay, great.
Okay. So I don't want to dwell on 14 Mile just because that was kind of our main corridor we focused on last meeting, but I'm happy to hear any comments you have as I just kind of recap it. So we started calculating kind of sizes of properties. So one thing we found out was really the average block depth is rather consistent with, for example, the recent Burger King site plan you saw. So that was about 166 feet. So in relation to what you see elsewhere on 14 Mile, that's pretty similar. The average block depth ends up being about 170 feet. So future redevelopment is kind of working with that same type of parameter. I think that's kind of important to keep in mind as you keep in mind, massing as well as kind of, as Commissioner Carpenter mentioned, kind of a scaling of development as you kind of start inward near the downtown and move outward. This is the most densely populated corridor. About 9.8 people per acre live in this corridor, as well as about 6.5 households per acre. That's comparable to Clawson as a whole, in that it's a lot more densely populated. It's almost 2 people more populated per acre, as well as more than 2.5 households per acre more than the general Clawson citywide rate. There's a pretty fair amount of housing choices compared to the rest of Clawson as a whole, and there's a very low vacancy rate. So it's an area that is tends to get units occupied when units are there. People move into them.
How do you guys determine vacancy rate? I mean,
We got
just-
that from the 2020 census. So
Okay.
it is 2020 data. It's obviously the most accurate because it is the decennial census
Does that cover?
by block group, and it's by block.
Okay, so it covers
census block.
residential and.
Just residential vacancy.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, not commercial. We're not talking about businesses. When we say vacancy rate in this
Okay.
report, it's
and
residents.
I'm sorry, that means single family and multifamily.
any kind of
Okay,
residence. Yeah. So.
And you're just talking strictly, how far out do you go?
So it's a little weird, and that's why I did per acre, because the blocks are drawn by the Census Bureau. So sometimes it takes like the full north and south block of the single-family residential neighborhood next to it, and then sometimes it takes just the block of like 14 Mile and then the rear street that's parallel to 14 Mile. So it's kind of it's an odd looking. The Census Bureau it's a little inconsistent, where sometimes it takes the full on north and south block, which is a longer. Looking at it at a map, it's kind of a more elongated north to south block. But then sometimes the block is taken as like a horizontal east to west block with just the first side street to the south. So I don't know if that makes much sense. I could show you a map.
Yeah, I was just curious, because
yeah.
I mean, proportionally or statistically, I would think that there's probably
Yeah.
less houses to be vacant.
Well,
Because
and that's
a lot of that is
and that's
commercial.
why we're talking rate.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
I could have given the population just in terms of raw stats, but because of this, like, the inconsistency on where the block is drawn, we just focused on these rates instead. But you are correct. Maybe if there is more,
There's definitely
there
more
would be more
commercial
single
than.
family at times if it's taking that long north-south block
Right.
than if it were to be taking just the corridors block. Overall, though, I mean, for the most part, when I took this data, the block data is usually not going any further than really that first intersection, north or south of the 14 mile.
And you're not doing a commercial read on that?
No,
or-
there isn't commercial data for the
Oh.
Census Bureau, for the decennial census on commercial.
But the
occupancy.
residential multifamily fits into that
Yes,
on your
yes.
data? Okay.
Any residential unit. So multifamily, duplexes, single family, townhomes,
Yeah.
even senior living. So that
Oh,
was
yeah.
one thing that skews.
I'm sure that boosts us up.
It skewed the households
Yeah.
up big time because
Yeah.
that's way more households because they're just usually a lot of times just single people
Right.
households. So that boosted this number up. I think, in my opinion, the 6.5 is so high because of the senior living.
Well, and then
This
the old senior
tower.
center would
Yeah.
definitely boost that data, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many units are in there, a lot. But yeah, okay, well, interesting.
So overall, just the most people live in the most densely populated corridor of these four is this corridor, and it's by quite a large range. It's probably one of the most densely populated places in the city overall. So, again, the design of some of these blocks are actually kind of the more urban form that we start to see in new development these days, where a lot of these are these old workshop uses that were really brought towards the street to begin with in the 50s and 60s. That's a good thing for considering non-conforming characteristics, which the zoning ordinance always needs to grapple with when you start these new development ideas, new policy recommendations. So the parking, trying to get parking in the rear, a couple of these blocks here already have that, so that's kind of a good sign. But there are some strip centers throughout the corridor that would need to grapple with resolving some kind of non-conforming characteristics. Here's just an example of the kind of the average look of that workshop block there. Manitou, so that's at Manitou and 14 looking east. So it goes kind of this workshop use and light industrial use block goes, I would say it goes a couple blocks where there's pretty ample parking in the rear and the storefront brought towards 14 Mile. This lot specifically was about 186 feet deep, and there's a huge amount of parking to the rear that, based on aerials, is never even close to being occupied.
Well, so can I ask a question on that? Let's say, okay, if we have an average of 186 feet depth, and we put, what's our capacity on an 186, and I don't expect you to know this, I guess, but 186-foot depth, and I assume that most of the width is also pretty consistent. They seem pretty consistent. What size multifamily mixed use can we put on there with our current parking? I guess would be a question
So,
I would want to
yeah,
know.
I think a good the recent Burger King PUD, so that met the parking requirements, right? For the residential alone. So that kind of size, I guess, yeah, that kind of size would be pretty close to the ordinance, I think, right?
The Burger King? And
Yeah.
If you add in the commercial parking, then they'd be way over, but since that's downtown.
Yeah.
So you'd probably wind up with a smaller scale project overall.
A slightly smaller
Because
scale,
you're gonna have
yeah.
to provide the commercial parking.
And what was the, how many units were in that one? Do we remember?
25 to 30, I think.
25 to 30 units?
Don't quote me on that, though.
That's okay, I mean, just okay. Units, okay.
So, I mean, we that's kind of our summary of 14. I know we talked about it a little bit last meeting. What are your thoughts on the way you want to see this corridor redevelop? What do you like about it currently? What kind of potential do you see? We can talk about uses too. What kind of uses do you want to welcome here? Perhaps permitted by right as well.
Personally, I feel like the disadvantages are that we haven't seen much development there, right? That's the one downfall, in my opinion. In terms of, I mean, and when you say that an average is 186, I know that there are varying lots there, so I didn't know if it's something we can consider a special use permit for certain, especially as we move further away from downtown, further away from density, a certain mixed use by special permit or a certain density by a special permit. I'm just throwing out ideas that I was thinking in my head.
So maybe more permissive zoning in terms of use closer to downtown, but as you get further, maybe consider.
Right, and I guess it also depends on what we have backing up to it, because there's a lot where we don't have a residential home that's, like as we've
Yeah.
seen with other site plans where we've got neighbors that are concerned about people looking into their backyard.
Yeah.
So like there's certain lots that can accommodate a more dense use, especially towards the downtown where the high school is and the homes
Yeah,
are,
because
it's
they
different.
back
Right.
other commercial uses or other non-single family
Yeah.
residential uses.
So I don't know if I can put in at least my opinion, an overall corridor type stamp on things, but I know you talked about marketplace too, or groceries and stuff, and I was surprised that we don't have that use allowed for
Yeah.
like a little mart, and it seems like that would be a kind of a natural.
Is that use allowed in some of the B districts? Grocery or convenience marts?
I think that under retail, it
would Okay. probably
Oh, it would be permitted in retail?
So it probably would be as retail in B3 or B1 maybe? B1, okay.
Yeah, I
So it
think-
might just
I
be a
think-
matter of nobody's had a good plan to come in here and,
I think we'd have a good demand for it. I think that a lot of residents would like to see like a fruit stand or a vegetable stand. What is now Val's Pet Supply, that used to be a
Okay.
vegetable place when I was a kid.
and where is, I'm sorry, where is?
It's at 14 and Rochester Road.
Okay. Oh, yeah, yeah.
But a lot of people around town, if you're in a hurry you just grab some food items on your way home.
Right,
We
like
have
a
a lot
daily
of small party stores, but somebody would be,
fresh food?
yeah. but
Would
that's-
be
but-
great.
But that's, again, that's not up to us, so that's, we got to
Right.
get somebody to open it up.
But we can encourage
Yeah.
things, right? Yeah.
Make it easy for them, yeah.
I've actually spoken to a handful of people over the last year that have interest in doing some type of market there. It's just finding the location. And so I think on 14 Mile here, this would be ideal. But while that building is pretty uniform throughout, from Manitou east towards downtown, the problem is it's owned by one or a handful of people, and that they're leasing space out. So if there's an open space, they're just going to fill it. They're not going to wait or develop. They're happy with what it looks like now. That's obviously can be different what we as a city envision there. So obviously that's something to think about too when we're talking about what we want to see there. We are limited. If someone owns property, they're comfortable with the operations. That's fine.
Right. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity on south west 14 Mile because there seems to be, there seems to be like little small buildings that are on there's a lot of green space there that we can encourage maybe more development there, just like an Ace Hardware type situation, depending on how far they go out. But I guess I don't know the right way to.
Nick, can you elaborate? Sorry, if I cut
That's
you
fine.
off. When you spoke, because that is definitely something that I hear a lot. Is a fresh market. So what were the major roadblocks for somebody who was interested, besides lack of leasable area? I mean, what were you saying? I'm just kind of curious.
I think space. I mean, you need a pretty big footprint to have that because you obviously have your space where you have
like
your
delivery trucks in and out. things like that.
Exactly. And there's been a desire to have it in, or at least closer to downtown.
Yeah.
And so again, that becomes a little bit limited on space and locations. But, you know, knowing that there's people interested in doing it, and if an opportunity comes up, we'll make the call and be proactive and let them know that there's an opportunity for that.
That's great. So you do have like a running list of potential, okay, that's
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
And have you talked to, I mean, I know it's out of your scope probably, but have you talked to places like the Clausen, I think it's the Clausen shoe store that I keep thinking of, it seems just kind of lonely there, right? Is that the building I'm thinking of that's,
In
there's grass
downtown?
around it? Yeah.
And the
the
one that's
old-
shoe on the roof?
Yeah, the old, where it seems, is that one like kind of in its own little green pasture there?
There's a vacant
There's
lot
a
right
there's a
next to it.
vacant lot there that is
Yeah.
owned, and they're working on some other projects right now.
Oh, are they? Okay,
Yeah.
because it seems like that could really be built up a little bit more.
Yes, and I
Yeah.
think long term that's the desire, but want to wrap a couple things up before.
Okay.
And then if it's on 14 Mile, but it's regarding the Westgate. Were you bringing up the Westgate district in this tonight?
We're not in this tonight, right, Joe?
Okay.
Kind of leaving Westgate out of discussion.
Westgate and BRD two.
Will be the next module.
Well, just because we're talking about 14 Mile, I'm going to bring it up that way it can kind of marinate in your guys' minds for the next couple weeks. So about 2 years ago, the Clausen Center, which is the big strip mall on the south side of 14 Mile, was acquired by a couple of gentlemen who are looking to expand that. And so if you guys are able to picture it, can't share the screen, but everyone should know that's the location next to Aldi, has Staples and some other small businesses there. Their desire is to do some type of commercial building in the front parking lot where there's a significant amount of unused space that is just concrete right now that is a vacant parking lot most of the time. And then they've also spoke about putting some type of condo housing to the south side of the building as well. And so just wanted to throw that out there for your thought that this is potentially coming sometime in the future. Westgate obviously doesn't allow residential right now. Is that something you would entertain as a larger site that is building in concrete if they're going to have some smaller commercial on the front, add green space, and on the back, maybe add a couple unit apartments or condos, and of course, add more green space as well.
On the back of the building where like deliveries are?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a huge unused parking lot.
Nick is a good
now.
example.
In the back
If
of
you
it?
know it, Troy,
Oh, it's a very
I
large.
think it's Big
paved
Beaver
area.
in Rochester. They
Yes.
just redeveloped that front parking space to develop that strip mall.
Precisely.
basically, in front of whatever, the Nordstrom Rack and all that.
Yes.
So that's
That-
the same idea.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
So, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
Just as an
I
idea.
mean, do you think
Yeah.
about when you're driving down, like Big Beaver on Troy, right? You've got two sets of strip malls, essentially. It's not really what they're called anymore, but
Yeah.
layman terms, where you might have like
Restaurants
Chipotle
in
or some of those quick grab bite eats, not fast food, and then some other commercial retail as well. So that is something I know is likely coming in the near future, and so just wanted to get you all aware of that, get your brain churning to see if it's something you'd entertain, how, when, if, because it does fall into the 14 Mile
Do
conversation.
they own the Rite Aid there too as well? The one that just is so sadly empty now?
I spoke with them on Friday, and they're in conversations with the owners on what to do there.
Oh, so is it the same owners as, it's not the same owner?
currently.
Okay.
No, not currently.
It's a huge piece of property there.
It is,
Yes.
yeah, my first thought was only because I use the ATM, but the Chase thing is right there, right? Are you talking about like right where the ATM is at?
Yeah, that
Essentially?
roadside part of the parking lot would be turned into some type of building.
Yeah, and how high can they go there currently, do you know, at Westgate? Is it single?
I can get that in 10 seconds.
Okay.
Hopefully.
9, 8.
No pressure.
2 stories or 30 feet.
Oh, okay. So they're not at their full capacity on that site as
No,
well, right?
not at all.
So they could potentially do, if we did approve a residential, do a mixed-use type thing there as well?
Right. But so and again, it's all conceptual and conversation, but they wanted to have housing just on the rear instead of housing on the front side, just because more commercial blends in with the front and housing blends into the back of that parking lot, if that makes sense.
I
Yeah,
guess,
and I
yeah.
guess there's residential already.
Exactly, and they're not, and it, yeah, they're yeah.
Was there any restrictions currently that you know of in?
Well,
like,
the residential housing isn't permitted in the Westgate district.
It would just seem sad to live in that back parking lot to me. I don't know.
and
I
that-
guess if you had
You're
green
part
space,
of
but
a
you're looking at a
neighborhood.
concrete wall.
I'm just, because I work over on that, like, Big Beaver Strip, and they do have that a lot behind
The commercial use.
commercial. There's some residential back there, but that one, like, backs up to the freeway. This at least backs up to a neighborhood.
Oh,
so
I
you
know
feel
what
like
you're
you're in a
talking about,
neighborhood
yeah.
at least if you come in through the residential, what is that, south side, you know?
Right.
It's, I could see it, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right, and I don't want that specific lot to, take over this conversation.
Right, yep.
But it's part of it because we're talking about 14 Mile, and I know it's something that's coming here in the near future. They're working through some obstacles right now on their end. So just wanted to give you the opportunity to think about it, ask questions in the future. Exactly. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, yeah.
So is there no way to explicitly, like, I guess, if we feel like a more dense, well, and I guess I know the answer, but a more dense use versus a quad or a unit that might hold, that might be more encouraging for like a family use? Because I think of Westgate, there'll probably be more of a family established use there, essentially, because you're kind of more in a neighborhood feel than a single person downtown that's using the restaurants and stuff. Is that discriminating if we talk about that? I just want to make
mean,
sure.
I don't know if it's discriminating talking about it in terms of a master plan sense and in terms of
No, yeah,
formulating
in terms of a
policy.
Master plan, from a master plan standpoint, I mean, if we are looking for, to be a family-friendly community, that's something we can talk about, certainly.
Yeah, and that's why I brought up the survey responses, because I remember we had that as a portion of what do residents feel comfortable with in terms of additional housing outside of just single family. So to your point, if it's, duplex or something different than, what we typically see, where it's studios and things.
And specifically, like, I really encourage like a 3-bed and up, because I do think that that's not just a missing middle for Clausen, but overall everywhere that they're, studios are hard. Studio efficiency, I've got a lease right now that I can't get filled. It's a studio. They're really just hard even for a single person, especially, after COVID. They're like, I don't want to eat in my bed anymore. Like, I want to feel like I have living spaces. So I would love to encourage for the future of the city, just, of diverse, including 3 bedrooms, because I don't feel like there's a lot of, rental type places that you can find a 3-bedroom as you're looking to establish possibly purchasing a home or whatever it is, or meeting that need. I feel like there's a strong need for a 3-bed and up,
I agree, and I just want to reiterate, I think every time we've had somebody here, the builders point to our parking requirements, so I'm not sure how that would work in this kind of unique situation where there's a lot of parking in that current,
Yeah.
when we're talking about one specific space, but you know what I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if we could incentivize through hey, if you want to build a 3-bed or up, we'll knock out a couple parking spots for
Yeah.
you. Like,
I mean, that's good material to share with us during this time. to
Right.
say
yeah, and I know
you're-
we've talked about
you're
it
more-
briefly,
yeah,
Joe,
you're-
in the past, possibly ways to encourage a 3+ bed development and incentivize builders in those ways, but we haven't put anything concrete
Yeah, because
yet.
in a community like Clausen, not necessarily a college town, a town that maybe has more families than college students rooming with each other, you're probably gonna have less cars in a 3-bedroom than, let's say, Ann Arbor would in a 3-bedroom. So, I mean, it does make sense to maybe incentivize a 3-unit, but not tack on the additional
Right.
parking requirement for the
Yeah.
3 units.
So just for your reference, the parking requirements for multifamily is 1 for each efficiency unit, 1.5 for each 1-bedroom, 2 for each 2-bedroom, and then 3 for 3+ bedroom unit.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Single-family home is detached or required.
right, so this is
Right.
where we've bumped into builders saying it doesn't make sense for them based on the footprint to do larger units with more bedrooms. That's where, like, can we change requirements based on, our zoning or something like that?
Like based on unit composition, the parking requirements change.
Yes, I suppose. I'm just trying to
Right.
get unique solutions for certain districts at least.
I would agree with that, especially if, like, let's say you give us 5 or more 3 beds, then we'll allow you to, bypass a certain, I don't know, criteria for a 2-bed. We'll only have you, just to kind of, because the efficiency ones, honestly, I'm just kind of like, we don't need more efficiency units. I don't know.
Hey, Nick, I have a question, just because of the development on the bank over here. Because the parking restrictions always gives the developers some grief as well. Have we ever thought about issuing residential parking permits like you see in the bigger cities? Like they're going to have those parking slots on Main and giving those residents an opportunity to have an overnight parking permit?
I can't speak in like the long-term past of that conversations come up. I know I've spoken to our chief of police on that, and then just in general, what do we think the feel would be? And I think it's something that, obviously the council would be the one to discuss in the long term. But, at some point where we do have to talk about how we have our overnight parking, and if it's in downtown, are we more flexible with it? I don't know. I don't have the answer, but it's something we've started chatting about.
Or allowing to overnight parking again with permits that they would have to pay for in a
Right.
city municipal lot, right? Something
And
like that.
specifically in our city lots, technically you're not allowed to park in there overnight. And I just had a conversation with Chief Baus, might have been before the new year, and are we incentivizing people to, after a night out at one of our lovely bars, to drive home instead of, hey, I'm going to get an Uber, hey, I should walk, and so do we maybe look at that requirement to see if we can encourage people to not do that?
I'm just trying to think outside the box. I know a lot of residents don't want to have the Royal Oak situation, right, where you can leave a vehicle on the street for months, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And I know you brought up the project at 150 North Main Street. They just submitted their site plan, and based on noticing requirements for the public notice that will be going out to everyone, I know that was a sticking point. They, I want to say, brought down their parking differential significantly. There are more efficiency units, but that's because they're trying to meet the parking requirement, and so that's relevant to the conversation right now, and that's what they're having to do to try and make their numbers work.
In
So-
downtown, we don't have a limit on efficiency.
That's correct.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
It's downtown, housing in downtown kind of serves a different purpose than it
for
does in the
sure, than a
neighborhoods.
Westgate, yeah,
Right.
or something.
I'm looking at the survey results right now. So 375 people answered the question, do you support the city's policy of not permitting on-street parking? 69.87% of respondents, 262 people, said yes, they support that policy. So about a little more than 2/3 of the people who responded to that question said yes, keep the cars off the street overnight.
Yeah, and we don't have the ability to cut that by district or anything, do we? Because
Ultimately you could, if the city
Because I'm just
chose to
curious,
do
obviously, a
that.
lot of people in the residential neighborhoods are gonna say no, but if you're closer to
Right.
downtown, you might not have. the same-
Well, I think we could allow
do it
for it in
against
certain
zoning.
districts, like a city center. or-
Potentially you could. It's in one of your general ordinances, so you just have to amend that general ordinance however you want it to.
And really, it's gonna be all eyes on it, right? Like, not just you calling on your neighbor who hasn't moved their car that doesn't work. It's like the police, the fire, like the commercial uses, everybody's kind of, so I don't think that there'll be kind of that same issue that people might have with on-street.
I mean, it could be an item you put in the master plan,
Yep.
right, as an implementation item,
Absolutely.
rather than a zoning item,
But does the DDA kind of determine that for the city center, or is that something we put out? Nick's shaking his head.
Conversation, but it wouldn't be necessarily just
Yeah.
for them to determine.
Okay.
Ultimately, city council has the control over what our general ordinances say, so that's ultimately where the decision lies.
Right, but if we did a permit type thing, as you were stating, we would need another entity of our, in-house, like Nick, we'd need someone to be out there issuing and checking permits and things like that, right?
Correct. You'd probably have two elements to it. One is, I don't know if it would be the clerk's office maybe that would issue that or something like that.
I mean, I don't want to say for certain, but it would probably fall under code enforcement, police department, and clerks for managing that.
Well, just an example, in Chicago, where my daughters live, all the residential areas usually require permits for your street. They're color-coded numbers, and they do traffic enforcement. So they do issue these permits for specific residents to park in that area.
Color-coded smart. 'cause
Very,
that's
very
a quick
effective.
visual.
I've got a
Yeah.
few tickets of my Michigan car in the wrong area in Chicago, so.
And there's zones, a permit is good in a zone,
Yep.
so if it's marked a certain area, then.
So like the zone correlates with the color of the permit kind of thing?
No.
Something like
Like
the
that.
number of the zone would be on the permit.
Okay.
So it could be an income stream for those violations to help with the infrastructure, so we'll help the city council out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Better put a lot
Selling
to
point, yeah.
it. So yeah, I don't think we're gonna solve the issue, but I would definitely leave those takeaway, right? So we're working on master plan updates, so we may not come up with the exact amendment that we want to make today, or even in the short term, but we definitely want to include this as getting more unique, flexible parking option. I don't know how you word that, but
In dense
Yeah,
areas.
the
Certain
denser
districts,
areas,
right.
Yeah, in certain, yeah. And maybe that's a conversation that would be great to have with the DDA because
Right.
they've done the parking studies and they have a vision,
Is this ultimately the city council's decision, or for the,
Ultimately, yeah, it would be.
ultimately?
so we make a recommendation to
But
council.
it's not that we can take a site plan and give them an option to do permits, if you will.
Right, the planning commission could, I mean, in theory, you could put, we want 8-story apartment buildings on 14 Mile in the master plan, but if the council never votes yes on that, it's
Yeah.
in writing in the master plan and not implemented.
No, I don't mean that. Let's take the PNC building, for instance. They're short 5 parking spots. If we give them 5 permits, can we do that as a planning commission?
The 5 parking permits?
Yeah, because you're going to have those cutaway parking lots on Main and that side street, and you could have
I
specific
doubt
permits
the
for
planning
that.
commission would have the
For the
authority
park,
to
okay.
issue those. It would probably fall under the police department or clerk's office, just like a fire permit or something along that
It
line.
would contravene the general ordinance
Yeah.
prohibiting on-street overnight parking.
Right, and we don't have a trigger and implementation yet for a permit type system, right? We'd have to have that established.
Right, I think that what the process would probably look like is, it's in the master plan, planning commission approves master plan, council approves master plan, then planning commission discusses potential ordinances, they approve something, recommend it to council for their approval, they discuss it at that level, and either kick it back or approve it and implement it.
Right, because
That's
we're
what the
not
process
writing
would be.
ordinances here, we're putting out a wide scope, an idea of,
Right, so that's what
things.
you're doing here, is talking about what could ordinances look like and change, and what do you view, and then, once the master plan is implemented, that's kind of the guideline for what direction the body would go and how to change ordinances, and which ones to address.
okay.
No underground parking like they have in Europe?
Underground?
Yeah, they have, a lot of parking's underground.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
You- you-
Elon.
Their property's so valuable, right? So you have buildings up on top and you go underneath.
You're going way far in here.
Underground is restricted for strictly water right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say we'd have a problem with that.
Yeah, that would be fun, right? Just watch out for that lead pipe.
Yeah. But yeah, just parking seems to be that vicious circle.
All right, I think that's a pretty good discussion on West 14, and I think we have some good ideas on really how to start shaping.
But I do think that in your
Yeah.
point with what he was saying last time, the density kind of spreading out as you move further away from downtown, I feel like that's very natural and that's something, at least I feel like, would be right there, right? And giving them flexibility for like a mixed use there. I don't know how people feel in terms of the type, like you
So
said, the
kind of
missing middle.
Continue downtown's look for a few blocks,
Yep.
and then scale down.
With that missing middle of
slowly,
a quadruplex type feel would be, I think that'd be great, like Auburn
Yeah.
Hills has that
Yeah, it's
along their
townhomes
downtown.
and stuff like that, yeah.
And I mean, those are condos, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like that feels like a good natural vibe
Mm-hmm.
when you're pulling into Auburn Hills.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else feels differently, but.
No, I like those style with the duplexes, like the example they did over at Target on Coolidge and Maple, where they built those more like very nice townhouses, they're very dense, but it looks very nice, and that's a nice neighborhood. They utilize that section north of the Target, for example.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
Okay.
I always think first floor masters are in need, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. Because those are like hallway.
Yeah.
All right, let's maybe move on to East 14 Mile, if you're okay with that. This is a lot different of a corridor, really, than the West 14, so while West 14 is a lot more of a candidate for mixed use, it seems like, and for higher density, this is a little bit different. It's mostly single-family, low-density residential as the predominant land use. We see this as there's some pretty deep lots, there's some rather large lots. Some of them are pretty narrow, but some of them are greater than 75 feet wide and about 180 to 190 feet deep. We just see this being a potential opportunity for gentle density. That's things like just disguising a duplex in a former residential, single-family residential home, or using the similar massing and scale as a single-family home to build that duplex or build that 3-unit or 4-unit structure. So that's kind of what we mean when we talk about missing middle as well. Obviously, this gets into some pretty intense missing middle, as I stated earlier, with kind of some of those larger complexes to the right. That's more best suited for a larger city. I would think Clausen should be maybe interested in a little bit of the kind of this area, if you see my mouse, the duplex, cottage court facilities, you know, even a fourplex, kind of disguised as a single family home. I don't know if you are familiar with MML's Pattern Book Homes for 21st Century Michigan, but it's a publication they just did on example designs that architects, contractors could use to build missing middle housing. They're trying, what Michigan Municipal League is trying to do is they're really trying to communicate to both municipalities and contractors good strategies to do infill housing in cities. And the Pattern Book Homes book is a great resource I advise maybe you all look into. We can send it separately after this meeting. It's really just designing duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes, that gentle density missing middle, the way you would design a house, essentially.
So those are fourplexes that we're looking at?
So this one right here is a fourplex design. It's 3,600 feet, so it would be a rather small fourplex. It would be 4 units divided by that, so it'd be about 915 square feet of floor area per unit. So they would probably be 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom, I would assume.
Are those common area entrances, or?
There would probably be a common area entrance at that first entrance. That's getting into kind of the nuts and bolts. I don't know how much of the design the commission would want to get into, but I think in this example, they might be looking at 2 entrances, one here at the front and then one on the side. It looks like where this canopy is. You would probably share that entry hall.
But they're all upper, I guess layout's important to me,
Yeah.
and I just think that because when you talk missing middle, there's a lot of missing opportunities for people to have first floor type bedrooms, because we've got an
Yeah.
aging demographic,
Yeah, exactly.
especially in Clausen. There's so many homes I go into that there's no master, and
Yeah.
I feel like that's just a need that a lot of these don't
That's a
offer.
very, very important consideration to consider visitability and ADA accessibility on first floor units.
Right.
So that's good feedback. We do want to hear. These ones, I don't know if it's just because they were trying to make them look very architecturally sound and architecturally beautiful in these designs, and I think usually a staircase kind of adds to that aesthetic.
For sure.
you know, I don't know if the purpose with this exercise was to, you know, visualize the accessibility standpoint.
And it looks
You know?
more like a house,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's an easier take.
So I do recommend, you know, everybody maybe take a look at this book. It's they have some pretty good content in it on how cities grapple with a lot of times maybe places a bit more populous than Clawson, maybe like the principal cities in the state like Detroit and Flint and Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo and such, on how they see infill housing taking place. But I think in terms of the higher intensity corridors, like the ones we're discussing today, there is plenty of single-family residential that we should still permit, because we don't want to take away, no one's trying to take away anyone's home, but it's, you know, permit single-family as well as some increasing gentle density of 2 to 3 to 4 units potentially.
And would we require a green space type feel
You
with
could,
those?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it'd be very easy to, I would think, still be able to have some good screening, landscaping green belt to the rear maybe, or to the side yards. What you could do, so looking here at this next slide, here's an example of a bunch of the lots that are about 198 feet deep. And these are just a random sample. I have no idea what's going on with these. I have no insight on any of these lots. But I've just wanted to show them because I thought it was interesting. As you can see to the left, there's a commercial building that has a lot of parking. So you can kind of see the scale in a parking lot with cars. And if you could just kind of transpose a few of these spots to the rear, you could conceivably build a couple more units per lot and have the parking to match that, and have plenty of space to work with. So that's just kind of a point that we saw when kind of just sampling with what the East 14 Mile corridor could look like in the future, incorporating some of these smaller missing middle designs.
And I feel like North 14 East is a lot different than South 14 East.
Yeah, there is a differing lot size too. So the south side of the East 14 Mile is a little bit less deep.
Yeah.
It's about 140, whereas this is about 198. I still think with 140 you have pretty good space to build. In the event of a tear down and a build new, you could move maybe the house up a little bit and still provide pretty good parking in the rear.
Now, do you know how many of these are rentals? Because I
have no
think that's
idea.
Val's.
These
A lot
are
of these
just-
houses are, I know along that
Yeah.
corridor, a lot of rental properties.
I
right?
don't
We
have any
that information.
context
Yeah.
on that.
A lot of them are
Yeah.
rentals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, it is the game.
Oh, yeah.
game-
Oh,
Oh,
comic
that's
gate.
North 14?
Yeah, this is the
Yeah,
north
oh,
side
okay.
of 14. I just thought it was interesting in terms of a scale. You can really see, you could see that there's a lot of space in some of these properties to build 4 parking spaces to match the 4 units or 3 units that, you know,
Right,
maybe
well,
could
and
be
to
built.
consider the fact that those lots for the residential on the other side are pretty much deeper too, so you
Yeah.
don't run into the things that we're seeing on 14 Mile where the lots
Yeah.
are kind of shorter,
Yeah.
and you've got someone right in your backyard. In a variety of lot sizes too, those are all, those are
Yeah.
all quite different in size, in
Yeah.
width.
Yeah. I mean, in general, too, a large or a busy vehicular traffic street, I mean, it's a little better suited for a little higher density than a traditional single-family home, too.
Well, and
So,
I was gonna bring
yeah.
that up too, because there are single families there, and there was, I was talking to a neighbor there when I was showing one of the house, and I'm like, how do you even back out of your driveway? They're like, they don't let you have a back away space, right? on
Not in the
14
front
Mile.
yard, but
Right.
in the backyard, you could probably build something.
Right, if your
Yeah,
garage isn't
yeah.
there, but it would seem like this use, having the parking in the back, would give you that ultimate
Naturally,
turnaround spot
yeah.
to where it feels more natural to be able to safely pull out on 14 Mile.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested in looking at that, and you're talking all the way to Rochester, correct?
Yeah, just the city limits. So even beyond Rochester on that north side of 14 Mile is still in the city limits until I think it's like I don't know the street name, but it's,
Sure, to Campbell, yeah.
Campbell, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's-
One or two
yeah,
blocks
yeah.
there, where there's a sign.
I think it's the half, the half of Camp, before
Because there's
Campbell.
still, especially on the north side, there's a considerable amount of single-family homes
Yeah.
there that are just single-family homes. So
Yep.
I don't know how we do that without displacing, running into what we did with.
Would we have to rezone?
Well, you could rezone it to a higher
R2
zoning
to-
district.
Yeah.
That does not, you would still probably make single-family a permitted use, just so
Sure,
that you're
but
not
it's for
making them
future development.
non-conforming.
If somebody bought three
Exactly.
houses next to each other.
Somebody could demo and build,
Okay.
a triplex, or whatever kind of density you all are interested in seeing.
Can we specifically say triplex or no?
Sure.
We can.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a use, it's a type of use, so, and we're talking about, when we say duplex and triplex and fourplex, we're not necessarily talking about the number of bedrooms, we're talking just about the number of
yeah, I know.
units. So
Try
it
is
could be
three.
whatever intermittent number of units or mix that you would, see in terms of bedrooms,
So essentially, somebody could take one of those homes and say, I'm gonna rent out each bedroom, and it's a triplex?
No, that would
Okay.
still be a one dwelling unit, because there would still just be, I assume, one kitchen with a couple bedrooms that are then
Gotcha.
all access. I don't know if we want to get into the definition of family here, but,
Each
when we're
dwelling
talking
has
about-
their own kitchen and
Exactly,
bathroom, right? I
that's-
gotcha.
That would be separate units, so
Okay.
a one bedroom, or a 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 unit, et cetera.
So one takeaway for this conversation could be that we could potentially look at rezoning some of the R2 that is on, what is that, 14 Mile?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Frontage to-
just that frontage, not like going in past that first, okay. But just in the off case that, somebody does make an agreement to buy multiple single-family homes, they could build a
Yep.
duplex,
Or if
triplex,
it's a
whatever.
big house to begin with, you could retrofit that existing shell into a duplex, for example, so.
Yeah.
Let's say it's a 4-bedroom house to begin with, you kind of renovate it into a way that has 2 bedrooms
Yeah, 'cause I was just-
distributed throughout 2 units.
If you just start looking on the map, right, there's no real green, open space today, except for in the city center and that, between like Florence and High. And then it really goes into single-family homes all the way to
Mm-hmm.
Rochester, and then on the north side of 14, past Rochester,
Yeah.
going towards Campbell.
Towards
it's all
Campbell.
single-family again, so there's not a ton of opportunity in this corridor, except
Mm-hmm.
a rezone type scenario that we look at.
Well, what I wonder is how we can soften that and buffer it a little, because as that process happens, there's gonna be a lot of people coming in and not very happy that they've got a whatever going. I mean, I guess if it's a quad or a triplex, it's not gonna be a 27
Yeah, we're trying to make
unit
it-
building that's staring in your backyard.
Yeah.
Trying to
and-
make it fit the aesthetic of.
Right. So you're talking smaller
Yeah.
density there,
Yeah,
right?
I
Not-
don't think we're probably looking at anything more than 4, 4plexes, so 4-unit buildings. I think, when we say missing middle and gentle density in the city of Clawson, I think we're really looking at the 2 to 4 unit, residential structures. A lot of times too, with the noise, whatever noise could come from these, units, I mean, probably wouldn't be anything greater than the ambient
Traffic,
noise that's
yeah.
occurring on
Right, that's why
traffic.
main road,
yeah.
I feel like it's
Yeah.
It's a good candidate
acceptable.
for a little
Yeah.
higher density.
perhaps.
Do we have current, sorry.
No, go
Joe.
ahead.
Do we have current, I don't know what our setbacks and things are for quads, tris, duplexes. Is that something we need to look at, kind of implementing a certain, taking into consideration this particular area? What our build might look like, what our lot coverage might look like, our green space might look like?
Yeah, we could set those standards in zoning.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, if you were developing a new district for the frontage, you could absolutely determine what you think is the most appropriate rear setback to the neighborhood behind.
And what kind of buffer trees or.
Yeah.
I mean, it is kind of interesting,
landscape
just
you'd
looking
wanna
at
see.
the zoning map, that it's the only zone, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of my thoughts here. If you look at the zoning map, there's basically no R2 on any of 14 Mile or Main that touches the main roads, right? Except for this West 14 gate. And then there's a lot of R2 that touches 14 Mile. So we have, precedent that you could rezone it in the off case that we could develop some quads, whatever. And it wouldn't be out of place, in my opinion, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So I would leave that as
agree. Yeah.
a possible action item to
Yeah.
consider further.
Okay. Sounds like
And
everyone's
if
decently.
this board agrees, but I'm just
Yeah.
trying to look at the map and think about what we're talking about. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of potential, right?
I think it's a good opportunity just to give people a little bit more flexibility in
Right.
terms of.
And I was curious,
Yeah.
just continuing to look at this West 14 corridor that we're looking at. So there's it looks like two vacant properties that I could see on the map, right? And one is just east of Old Port, and then one's kind of across the street where they demolished a couple of houses
Yeah.
between Florence and High.
Those,
Yeah,
And do we know if there's restrictions and holdups there, or what is why haven't those been developed? Is there something that we could address?
So the
Sorry if I'm naive and don't know the background.
The Florence and High property that you're referring to actually was approved for a 10-unit development, but that was about 4 years ago, probably. I don't know that Nick had even started yet.
4 years. They just
Yeah.
kind of bulldozed
So-
and disappeared.
Right.
I know that they started to run into problems with DTE of all things when they got kind of into the process. So I'm not sure if they ever got final engineering approval or not on that. I don't think they did. So that would be an expired site plan at this point. It's been quite a while, but there was something approved there.
Okay, so there was no issues that this board can address in terms of zoning or anything else that was hindering them. It was outside of our control, it sounds like.
Yeah, in that case, it was something after the fact that
Okay.
caused the
They were
development not to
combining a couple
occur.
lots, and there was some question about behind the building, the alleyway that was there, who owned it.
Yes, there was some question about that. I think they got that resolved,
I thought
but
they
they ran
did,
into
yeah.
other problems. And the one on the south side that you're referring to near Old Port, I believe that is owned by the same person who owns Old Port, if I'm not mistaken.
Didn't we talk about that one recently too didn't we talk about that one or no, when we were rezoning? Huh?
No, we just did the facade of Old Port, that's all.
Oh, no, I meant like that area. Didn't we rezone that area to allow for another use or no?
Yeah, that's
Renshaw.
it's
Or-
the CMD district now.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
okay.
So yes, it does have a different zoning classification than it once did. And, I think it's just a matter of the right, fit for what the property owner is looking for. And of course, there are some other vacant lots right in downtown that, that's just a matter of
Yeah.
the owner not moving.
We
on
have
them at all.
little control over that, but I was just making sure there
Exactly.
was nothing, like I said, that this board can control that was hindering development.
I don't
If it's
think
somebody
so
sitting
at
on it
this
looking
point.
for,
Yeah.
the most amount of money that they can make out of it, that's their prerogative. I can't do much about that.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think it's anything the city's done. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way.
Is there, and this is maybe beyond this board still, but do we have any controls around taxing or anything else, to promote development on this vacant land that's kind of prime, right downtown? Are there-
Yeah, to an extent, we don't have an ordinance right now that addresses it, but it's something we've floated internally, kind of how, very high level right now. And if it's something we want to do, I mean, does it actually incentivize people to develop on it, or is it kind of like, I don't want to own property in the city because this is how they treat me if I'm going through
Sure.
hardship? And I don't know the answer to that. That's kind of where we're we're floating it, and we're trying to do a better job of keeping in communication with the owners of properties like these ones that are in great areas of Clawson that would really provide an asset to the city, and how we can encourage them to do something there. And that's something we're definitely trying to expand on what we do.
Yeah, maybe we don't want to penalize them, but if there's an incentive,
Yeah,
right, or something
exactly.
different, sure.
Well, and it does
Exactly.
seem almost to me like there's a long-term strategy there,
Yeah.
almost. I feel like they're kind of buying up little lots, at least from what I saw, they're buying, their name is consistent in that area, so I think there's probably a long-term
Well,
strategy. That's my
Not
assumption.
all of these lots are owned by the same person or same persons in general. These two specifically are not. They're one-offs.
Oh, they are, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But there's a couple throughout downtown that they may fall under the same person's ownership, but not specifically these two, at least.
Yeah. Josh, were your questions answered, or?
Yeah, thank you, sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't
of
mean to
Yeah,
get
I
off
just-
track. I was just,
I was curious with all the conversation we had about North and South 14, potentially if we were thinking of opening up zoning there, is that, and I believe the answer is yes, we would be mailing those residents that live in those zones to get feedback prior to changing any type of zone, right?
So
So there's probably not a statutory requirement to do that. However, that doesn't mean we can't do it.
Okay, because that's something I'd very much want to kind of open up, and at least we say, hey, we asked you, we wanted to encourage you, kind of thing, right?
I think it would be useful to even do like a workshop or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
is that, are you referring just to changing zoning?
Yeah, if we're building a density towards single-family homes that are currently there, I would love the opportunity so that when it does come to putting a fourplex there, that we've shown in good faith, essentially, we've had conversations and we can take their feedback because there might be things that we don't think
Oh,
about,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
That's a good idea.
Yep.
Yeah, and if we switch to different districts and things, I'd love to talk about 01 if we have time, because it seems.
Yeah, of course. I think that's a good.
I think you
that's a
mentioned in your
good
note that it's kind of.
It's a good topic on our next
Yeah.
next corridor.
Okay, thanks.
So
Which we can move on to.
yeah, I think we got some good feedback on East 14. So thanks for that. So North Main. I think this is where 01 is best discussed. So it's kind of that mosaic of zoning districts, including a lot of 01. It's got some, I think, some B1 and some B3 as well. Further north, it gets pretty automobile oriented north of Elmwood, and then there's obviously the industrial parks in the city limits of Troy, north of Elmwood too. There at the east side of the street. There's I think really looking at the area, you can sense that there's a little bit of a logical extension of downtown's mixed use going up a few blocks near City Hall. But then once you kind of hit Elmwood and go north, you're kind of, there's some very different land uses, and there is some more of a low density residential feel on the west side, and then the city of Troy on the east side, which obviously isn't your jurisdiction. So,
One thing to note about Troy,
yeah.
on the north side of Elmwood, there's that giant open field. There's contamination there, and that's why that's never been developed. So I think there's like heavy remediation that has to occur there. So that's probably going to be an open field for a very, very long time. Just a note.
And that one's not brownfield permissible, right?
It might be, but you'd have to get an awful lot of funding, I think, to remediate that property and make it worth your while to develop
Probably need to
it.
be pretty intense development, right?
Yeah, you might need some grants and things on
And
top
is
of
that Troy?
brownfield.
You
That is
said?
in Troy.
Okay, I was gonna say, because I feel like
Yeah.
I've heard from neighbors about that site, but like,
Yeah.
it was really bad, right? Like
It was,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
There's a reason it's an open field.
and they're testing it like every other month almost. I see them out there.
Yeah,
so.
they're out there all the time coring. Yeah, every
Yeah.
time I drive to my son's violin lessons, I see them. So
regardless of everything else that's going on the Clausen side and on the Troy side, that's going to be a hole for a long, long time.
Yeah, that's why we ended up with the little rotary park there. We took the house down because the soil was contaminated underneath that, right?
Yeah, that's right. The little park on the corner
Yeah.
across. Yeah.
But it is interesting, so KFC or not KFC,
That's
wait, what?
Knights of Columbus.
Yeah, KFC. KFC and then the apartment, they tested those soils and those were fine. It went kitty corner? Okay. I
Doesn't
was
make
just-
sense, but that's what happened apparently.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious, because I've always wondered that, okay.
Yeah, so then, just talking about what building and site design might look like, I'm aware that you did recently approve that site plan that's being built out right now, over there on North Main. They have a little bit of that, storefront, retail or office space in the front, which I think is good. Design for mixed use, you bring the orientation of the building up towards the street, and you generally have, you're generally building towards a safer street as well in terms of like speeds and high speeds and different kinds of pedestrian transportation. There's a decent amount of parking lots in the area. I don't know how often they're filled the way you all know as residents, so I'm a little bit reluctant to speak about the capacity and the ability of those to serve other uses at other times, but maybe during off hours, they're always a good option for parking. This is also really noticeably probably the area that lacks trees and kind of a canopy, so I think it'd be nice to consider landscaping improvements whenever site plans come along in this corridor, because it is, it's noticeably lacking frontage trees, which provide a good canopy and do make the streets safer in terms of kind of enclosing that racetrack rather than having that racetrack with wide lack of barriers and just a free ability to speed. You plant trees and you have a canopy and you generally make people drive slower.
And that's
With-
not current in our ordinance, correct, on that?
So do
We
you?
do require some frontage trees in the ordinance now, so if development were to come up there,
Okay.
yeah, you'd get some.
And you've got a couple underdeveloped lots that are too right past this
yeah.
location.
Yeah,
that's also empty.
there's still a couple.
Large.
Yeah.
And there's some missing sidewalks too, right? There's no sidewalks on that side of the street as well.
There's a couple places where it's fragmented, yeah.
On that, wait, where's our missing sidewalk? On
It
Main
would be
Street?
On Main Street, past this development, past the library, I think there's two open lots. I don't think there's a sidewalk going through there that stops.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Where
didn't-
the credit union one or the credit union
Oh, is there
yeah.
still no sidewalk there too? Interesting. And it would, I know Nick was gonna work on certain sidewalks with the grant, right? The sidewalk grant, is that something we can put into master plan to fill all our Main Street sidewalks? They were talking about at the credit union
Yeah,
there.
right where this development's at, past the credit union, I don't think there's a sidewalks in a couple of those lots.
You're talking on the east,
Is there?
I'm on the map, unless it went away
I was gonna say on the side that's Clausen and not the side that's Troy. So on the west side, there's sidewalks all the way down, but I didn't know if you were talking about on the east
I thought a
side.
bit closer here. Well,
Nope, there's sidewalks all along.
so if we wanted to green up that area, do we have right of way on that, on Main Street where we could
Yeah, I
have
mean,
trees?
you could make
placed
a
in?
recommendation
Yeah.
that the city
Place trees there?
has a program to place more trees in the corridor right-of-ways.
Yeah.
With that, you might even consider, like we've discussed before, on-street parking as well,
Yep.
just kind of shrinking the actual road surface and then being able to provide parking and trees. I think that's a really good, those are really good quality changes to a high-speed,
Yeah,
high-speeding
that was being
street.
addressed with the last site plan
Yeah.
between, well, Lincoln and Bowers.
Yeah.
I think, right?
Yeah.
I think if the planning commission felt that, doing some type of road diet and having on-street parking on North Main Street to a certain point, I don't know if Elmwood's the right answer, that's quite a distance for on-street
Yeah.
parking. But for part of that, to add in more right-of-way, because the right-of-way is, 5-6 feet, they can't sustain that large of trees. But if you wanted to expand the right-of-way, have some parking, that allows some more flexibility for what type of trees can go there. So if that's something this board wanted to see in the master plan, I think that'd be one that would really make that area more attractive.
So you're saying expand the right-of-way, are you talking about eminent domain on the?
No, expand, okay, you're not expanding the
Towards the-
right-of-way, the green space.
Street to road.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, so I should have made that more clear.
That's
Okay.
up to us. We would make the recommendation to go that route to get that started.
You could, it doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
gonna happen, but it would be something that if the council approves it, they're aware of and wouldn't be necessarily precisely.
Right, okay.
I feel like it feels good in certain parts there,
Right.
but
I think you'd have to draw a line, like Lincoln or whatever street comes after that, like Fisher, like how far would you
Blocks
go?
north of here, Main
Right.
Street.
right, because
you could
even,
Start that.
Right, like,
even certain uses along there, like the
talked
funeral
about the
home.
library.
So you're only talking that side of Main?
Up the library being the distance.
Yeah.
That would stop that,
On both sides of the street,
correct.
So,
yeah.
So essentially where Roth and then Phillips are.
right where we are, right?
Yeah, basically,
Rid of the traffic
From
light.
here to downtown. And honestly, I mean, I'm in favor of the idea. And especially, I mean, as easy as it is, just create I don't know if there's two separate possible items you guys want to include, but adding trees definitely gives it that you're entering the downtown feel like we talked about. If we can't do that with bringing buildings closer, that definitely works. And then obviously talking about expanding, on-street parking to this point. I would love to get feedback from residents, right? Or you look at the survey
Right.
results or something that we could talk more about, but I think that's,
yeah, I think that on-street parking would really help, especially as the school district utilizes the one campus setting, that there is some potential for overflow, because, we don't know what it's gonna look like in the
right.
future.
And I guess I have 2 points, and I'm sure the chair might have some opinions, because the way, you live right here, right? So there's
I'll end up with one parking space directly in front of my house.
right, and that's where I'm curious to get, perspective of residents as well, instead of, but, obviously there is a lot of parking issues, especially when you think about like the opening of, Biscuits and Gravy, right? And they struggle to find parking, and I think you mentioned, well, there's municipal parking, but this lot's not available, correct? To that overflow parking, what you're referring to. that would-
Right,
Might
and-
be able to be solved by on-street parking.
Correct.
Which lot's not available?
This one that we, right here.
I don't think anybody will get a ticket for parking and walking
But
to Biscuits
I-
and
Well,
Gravy.
don't say that, because if someone gets a
Yeah.
ticket, they're
Oh,
gonna,
okay. I mean-
I've heard on the planning commission
There's
meeting.
signs that are very direct that says municipal parking only.
Interesting.
Right, is it,
And when I see people looking for spots at Biscuits and Gravy, because I just tend to walk that way a lot, and especially on the weekends, there's so much overflow. They're going towards urgent care, anywhere down the streets. So this would be a good use of that lot if we can open it up for weekend parking. I don't know, but
and
that's,
the library certainly uses overflow as well for
Right.
businesses that need it around here.
yeah.
Yeah, the Biscuits and Gravy overflow started going to the Main Street Kitchen right next door to me.
That became an issue, right?
And they put up some signs saying, no, don't park here, we'll tow your car away. I don't think they enforce it, but.
Right, well, they do have a site plan to add in, I want to say it was 5 or 6 parking spots, and working through engineering right now to get that project along, so hopefully, sometime this year they can have that.
Yeah.
Well, with the road diet thing that we're talking about, and I know that's like a trigger word for a lot of people, I also want to counter that by, of course, establishing the fact that we also don't want this putting people in neighborhoods and speeding through our streets. And I would also like to kind of point out, I don't know, was the DDA talking about doing more boulevards, and is that something we can incorporate boulevards? And it would maybe be more cost effective to do a boulevard with a street canopy along a boulevard versus changing the streetscape in other ways? Just throwing that out there. I don't know if that's something we'd want to consider.
Define boulevard, just because
Boulevard being like a center median, because to
Oh,
me,
yeah.
that feels more like a pedestrian-friendly, kind of
Right.
walkable green space type thing versus more cement essentially, and that's just an idea. I don't know.
Which
Think that there's
That's what
positives.
Rye Locust done on Main Street.
Have they?
between 14 and 13, you'll find several of those islands. I personally don't see a advantage of them. There's not that many people walking across that they can't make without an island. And if you're coming from a side street, they're rather difficult to get around. It's,
Well, that'd be nice for to stop people from coming into the neighborhoods, maybe even a boulevard, so you can't take a left turn somewhere. I don't know. I don't know the intention with Royal Oak,
The
but
problem with that is that it prevents residents from entering their own neighborhood.
yeah.
true. Do you have a boulevard in front of your street, Joe?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But,
And the snowplows don't like them either.
Right, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you got a lot of driveways there too, so it would be tough to do a continuous boulevard. One thing I'll note is that when you go pretty, past Elmwood up Main Street, those are fairly small lots with single-family homes until you get to the commercial development. But there is a fair number of, there's a triplex, there's 2 duplexes, there's a kind of little mini apartment thing.
It's an
There
eightplex,
is a
yeah.
fair mix going through there. There's also one house that's been converted to like an insurance or legal office or something like that. So that's something to think about in that area is, do we maybe look at a similar situation that we're looking at on 14 Mile to provide a little bit more flexibility there on a main road? Especially when you have, industrial uses in Troy right across the street.
That one just doesn't feel as densely permitting as 14 Mile to me, but I don't know.
So Joe, you say we'd make that like a different zone, like an RM2 then, to allow it to be bigger,
Well, it
or?
would be kind of maybe even the same thing we're talking about on 14 Mile.
Okay.
But those lots are not nearly as deep.
They're not
either.
nearly as deep, no, but
I don't know if you can
again, they've already
capacity
got
hold.
the triplex and 2 duplexes and a little apartment.
Yeah, but those are
building,
one-off different sized lots. They're not the same lots as, and I'm not
They're-
trying to
they're
be
wider.
argumentative.
They're a little
Yeah.
wider. But yeah, I mean, if you aggregated a couple of smaller lots too, you could potentially do something with them as well. So it's just something to think about there. Because it is kind of a one little stretch of homes there, and there's a lot of pretty intense uses right across Main Street from it.
I mean, even duplexes where you are just kind of converting the existing shell into a second unit
Pretty
could
small homes.
give somebody the ability to have a little bit of a mortgage assistance, having a tenant in their.
Those are,
neighbor's home.
I'd be curious. I'm sure the front yard's big, right? But that's because you're on a main strip with high-speed traffic.
little wider
Or,
planting
I guess not
strip between the
high-speed,
sides.
but.
Yeah, the right of way is pretty big there with the planting
Right,
strip.
but it doesn't seem to me like it would really have the capacity, because they're so small and they're pretty close together.
The lots individually would be tough to do that on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, if you were to put 2 of them together or something.
Okay.
Potentially.
Could even have
And
a
in
s-
fact,
a
all
scale,
of the
minimum
existing
lot size.
duplexes and triplexes and apartments are on corners, so they can be accessed from, the parking area can be accessed from the side street, so.
Which that provides a good benefit of having less curb cuts on the
Yeah,
main
right,
street
ultimately on
for
Main,
pedestrian
more
safety.
That'd be nice. So the only unpaved the only unpaved sidewalks we have then are on Maple and then on Crooks. Because there's the funeral home on Crooks, right, Nick, that we have still yet, and then on Maple by the doctor's office.
There's a couple spots on Maple, yeah, it's like, Maple and, like Selfridge, just a little west of that. There was a missing sidewalk there. And it bounces around a little bit too, like, if you go east of Selfridge, like it's real close to Maple, and then all of a sudden you cross a driveway and it's like 10 feet further back.
Yeah.
Um,
But it would be nice to get that in our master plan somewhere to finish those.
Yeah, in
Just to
fact,
be a
that's
more-
one of the things
Requirement,
we've
if,
got in
we
there.
can't just force a business owner to do that, so if they
Yeah, you
do their
told me.
site plan, they'll have to do it.
Or you also talked briefly again about maybe finishing those with some grants, type sidewalk
I wanna say
grant.
that would be bond, so maybe. I'll have to circle back on that.
Okay, Commissioner Solomon, you had some ideas about O1 and some thoughts about
I just-
kind of the office land use?
I don't know the history
Yeah.
of O1
It
and
might
how
be
that was
some-
determined.
I
But
mean, it
now,
might
if you
be
look at the,
wise to,
yeah, I
I
think it
mean-
needs to be reevaluated
Yeah.
for sure.
I would agree.
maybe instead of O1.
Just based on the current uses you see
Yeah.
around there, and, and what's been popping up, but also that, I don't know if, Joe, or you know what O1 permits and doesn't permit, but it just doesn't feel like, it butted up very closely to city center too, so there could still be an O1, but I feel like as you get closer to the city center, I mean, the one property we're evaluating now at the bank barely fits in there, but there's other, I'd just love to get the opinion of you guys. and the
So
history.
do you want to know the permitted uses?
Sure, yeah, that's
So
helpful.
it's accessory buildings, family daycare homes, hospital, libraries, museums, nursing and convalescent homes, offices, government and public utility buildings, offices, places of worship, recreational, educational, human service centers, schools, business or vocational training centers, other uses similar to those permitted. And then there's a handful of special land uses that are all similar to what the permitted uses are. So it's specific, but there's not a ton that it permits.
Right, 'cause, yeah, I'm thinking of potential uses.
Yeah, I mean, it might be just moving them into
B1
a
or
B that's a little bit more flexible towards office uses and residential uses as well, maybe. One of the Bs, B1 or B3.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's attractive frontage for residential uses, especially given its proximity to downtown. Office is a bit restrictive.
Yeah,
You-
and that was my only thought.
And that's not a healthy market right now, so you're not really gonna get a lot of site plans if you got office.
Be a good place for a fruit market, maybe?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right now, it looks like you couldn't do that. But
Right.
it's so close to the city center, maybe without the real estate price of being right on the main road,
Right.
that we may be, shooting ourselves in the foot if we do want to see more of like a market type use or something like that.
But it also has less like of a transient type parking where a market you might spend, you're not as in and out as you are downtown, I guess. And maybe I'm wrong in my thinking on that, but typically a market, you'd have a little bit bigger of a parking spot, so you would be better off with a little bit less density, right? Like, it does feel more natural to be maybe a little bit off the beaten path, but still accessible by the downtown.
Right, and that's,
So
I
it does
guess,
feel natural there.
yeah, and that's just looking at the zoning map. I just feel like I wouldn't say we have to do away with O1 or anything like that, but if we could extend
The uses.
the uses or move it up to, call it, I don't know, Roth or Fisher, a couple blocks further north, it could open up potential uses that residents want to see more of.
Yeah.
And I thank you for clarifying what office was, because in my head, I'm thinking of actual office buildings, and there's just not a lot, like you said, right now. Everybody's trying to break their lease and get out of offices. I don't think that's going to be the hot market.
Right.
But yeah, I'd love to revisit
Yeah.
what we can do there on the south portion of O1.
You're saying south of Phillips, right? Is that what you said, south of Phillips and Roth?
Yeah, probably,
Okay.
right around that area. I
Yeah.
wouldn't extend it, too far, I don't think.
I don't think isn't that where the funeral home is, south of Phillips there?
Yeah, I'm trying to do both maps at the same time and
Yeah,
think about
I feel
my-
like that
yeah.
funeral home's not going anywhere, but essentially south of.
Sure, but there is a
Roth.
vacant lot there too, north of
Is
the
there?
dry cleaner,
There's
that
a
kind of falls
pretty
into
large one, yeah.
O1.
Oh, right, okay.
So are we restricting potential development there? I don't know.
Right.
Just.
Yeah,
Yeah, that lot's about 25,000 square feet.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I don't think office zoning is gonna get you anywhere on that lot.
Right.
It's just-
right, like you said, the price is high, right? Essentially, to put a dentist office there,
Yeah.
it's gonna be hard to fill that spot.
Okay, good content about North Main, I think, if we want to move to South Main, just for the last corridor to discuss tonight. So South Main is largely BRD zoning. I think from Joe and I's discussions, BRD is probably a district in general that we should probably revisit as well, in the similar sense of O1. Also, maybe see if BRD is reasonable to move forward with still. There's a pretty good mix of use here. There's a lot more, I suppose, walk-in type of uses here than there is for a big stretch of North Main. However, there's a lot less housing choice. There's a lot less like multifamily housing here than you'll see on like West 14 Mile, for example. Just kind of wondering if you think that just adding a little bit more housing options here would drive positive change, just increase the number of business goers in the area as well. This is the area with the smallest lots, though.
Yeah, that
overall.
was the first thing I noticed.
This is kind of what you're looking at on a lot of these lot depths. Pretty much one row of parking in the rear, and it's might not even be big enough for that at times. So the addition of the on-street parking is very helpful. So it might be worth planning commission consideration on if you want to give people a little bit more waiver flexibility here, just because it's not, you might not get a lot of development that then conforms with the ordinances if you are going to be strict on parking here. You're going to get a lot of just the current status quo here. There won't be a lot of renovation or redevelopment opportunities. So just that's one of the biggest aspects I noticed.
But
for this corridor.
are we exceeding, it seems like a lot of those places might be exceeding what our ordinance calls for in those lots too. Is that,
I would just say, I think that area of Clawson has gone through a lot of different zoning changes because it's kind of one of those spots that we're unsure what to do with. You're leaving Royal Oak, going into Clawson, but you're not into downtown yet, but you're driving into downtown. And one thing I've noticed is people that are interested in doing something with these lots, they are interested in here because of the proximity to downtown, but because of our zoning and some of the regulations we have in place, it's a deterrence for them to occupy the space or redevelop the space. And so if we instead change our perspective to a business renewal district to more of downtown extension, I don't know what we would want to call it, but that way it's more inviting as you drive in from downtown Royal Oak into downtown Clawson. It's not parking lot and cars and parking space. That's kind of what it feels like right now.
to me that feels more like it could be a commercial apartment type use, like a mixed
Like mixed.
use, but small, like, you know, not 26 units, but like maybe a couple of little units up above and a commercial use, because that kind of eases your residential, because there's a very residential feel right there at the end of that into downtown. But I don't think that there's the high density. I don't feel like.
A second floor that's multi-family residential, or a couple of units above a storefront, but maybe.
Or like townhome
Right.
style
Yeah, or
projects,
townhome,
like would that be
two-story.
something?
Right, yeah, like a townhome
Yeah.
style or just above, but and that's why I say I don't know exactly what we'd have to do with parking to permit that, because it doesn't seem like a lot of those are exceeding in overflowing parking very much, but I know their uses currently aren't very parking intensive, I don't know.
Yeah, that would be tough in footprints, right? And like, how do we get parking? Because there's on street, but we just talked about it, unless we allow permits or something like that. I don't know how we'd accommodate anything
Anything huge.
Right.
big around there, yeah.
Yeah, so like whatever the current use, I don't know what building this is actually, but like, are they at capacity in their parking lot? I don't think they usually are.
I think that building is just an office where they just have their employees parked there, so I don't think there's a lot of foot traffic in and out.
What is the vacancy? Do you guys know? Because there's so many buildings right there that
Commercial
look like,
vacancy? That's
yeah,
good.
commercial
Yeah.
vacancy. Sorry,
We
for like
can-
offices.
I
and
bring you
things.
some numbers.
I don't know that, but I can think of at least 3 or 4 that are certainly vacant right now.
Right. I know we talked about the potential like loaded dice. That's a little closer to downtown, but
Yeah.
there's a lot more south of that as well that there's
Right.
some dentists and I don't know. I would love to understand like what it's been like over there in terms of getting, renters in. And is that the right need based on the current uses? 'Cause, I
Right.
mean, that would help determine if we want to rezone this or not.
Yeah, and so if you remember last year, earlier in the year when there was a gentleman looking to occupy the old paper mill company, that they wanted to open up a dentist office there, and it wasn't permitted in the district, which is just kind of a unique thing not to permit there. So just items like that come up that, does it fit the district? Absolutely, but with our ordinance, no. And so that's why I think the BRDs just could use some extra attention and review to think about what we want to have written to encourage people to occupy those spaces.
Yeah, but like a dentist is totally different. So you're saying
Well,
allowing
that was an
dentists-
example.
Yeah, and is he there yet or no? by the
They're
way?
doing their build out right now.
Okay. But yeah, do you have a list of uses that you'd like us to consider in
I mean,
certain
I think just
areas, or-
looking and comparing it to like a B1 or B2 and seeing what you think might fit there would be best. The other site that is north of Gladwin on South Main Street. There's a little 1-story, 11-unit apartment building that it's zoned BRD1, but it would make more sense for it to be CMD just because it's on the same street or same block as other CMD. Right.
You're between Walper and Gladwin?
Yeah. So just another example, and housing isn't permitted in the district right now, and it's there, it's been there for a long time. What does that site look like in the future in your mind?
Are those, well, I guess I'm not allowed, I don't know. Are they condos? Are they like
It's
established?
just 1-story, 11-unit.
Okay. Because from what I remember, they have big front yards. I'm not sure the parking is in the back, correct? Kind of thing. Carport, I don't know.
I don't think so.
Okay.
So there's no housing allowed currently? So that's a special use or something?
It's
Not even special
grandfathered
use.
in.
Okay.
So I mean, unless someone's looking to redevelop it, it's fine as it is.
Right. But people might be interested in redeveloping it.
Okay.
Right, so we need to determine, because we don't want to have that Royal Oak feel of a 4-story, residential or multi-use or something like that as you come into downtown. But do we allow a 2-story if only 1 story is allowed now? Is that what you're thinking about? Like, so it could have mixed
Exactly.
use or something?
Exactly.
Well, and they could come in front with a PUD, couldn't they?
Right, and
Yes, today they could.
Yeah, so
And
I
that
don't
would be
think there's
the-
much stopping people there.
well, I mean, the point of a PUD is not because I don't like the zoning, so I'm gonna just apply for a PUD. The PUD is just a tool to make sure that the city is benefiting from a project as well. I don't know if I characterize that correctly. The actual planners might say it differently than I would. But, we don't want to have 7 PUDs in Clawson. That's just excessive. You want them to meet it. Our zoning ordinance is a way for a reason, and so we want to make our zoning ordinance with what we see there, not so people can look at it and go stray away from it.
Now's the, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Now's the time to find out the kinds of things the city wants to see so we don't have so many PUDs.
I can respect and understand that, but I would love to know, if we're signing up for a CMD use there, I'm not familiar off the top of my head of what type of density that might be and how that might affect our residential surrounding spots. So those are things I'd like to consider when talking about putting a very higher density use to a place, because we really have to consider, especially a lot of these commercial sites, we have to really consider the residential impact of
Yeah,
them
they're
because they're
so tight.
unique and they're tight, yeah.
In CMD, it's currently 2 stories or 30 feet.
And how dense can we get there?
really the density is controlled by.
The building size and
other-
right.
The other requirements.
Like the setbacks.
The green space, the
Yes.
setbacks, the building size, yeah. I guess I need more time to look at that.
Yeah, and of
Yeah.
course, we don't expect the answer right now, but just again, to get your mind thinking on it.
Yeah, I'd almost like to revisit. I feel like this is one of those areas that could use more attention, and I don't personally know the uses today in the, like we talked about the vacancy and how things are actually going, but you're right, there's a lot of, it looks like there's a lot of open spaces, and I'm hesitant to, build out anything large, but mixed use could make sense in certain aspects where it's not allowed today, but we have to be very cautious of the neighborhood being very next to that location, right? There's not a buffer, so we need to think about the best way to go about that. But I would love to kind of put this on the agenda next time too, just if we get more information or if maybe we have a chance to kind of drive around and look at
Yeah.
it further. I thought more about the north side just because that's where I am, but I drive this every time going to a doctor's appointment and things like that in Royal Oak. So yeah, if we can revisit that, that would
Yeah.
be, I think,
And
worthwhile.
this is the last slide for corridors, so I think overall, we might want to just, maybe not represent this presentation, but maybe just with the survey results being sent to you, maybe consider just a brief recap or brief
Yeah.
revisit of these corridors at next meeting.
Could you guys summarize some of the,
Yeah, so
the main
summarize your thoughts
takeaways
that
that
we've
we talked
taken
about?
notes on.
So I've got the
Yep.
full results here, and I can send those, but it's like a lot to
Sure.
look at. So we will look at summarizing
Okay.
that as well.
As well as your notes from tonight. Yeah,
Yeah, that we could just hone in on
yeah.
the main takeaways that we had from, I think, the three corridors that we got further along and agree upon, what things are worthwhile, including on a master plan versus there's probably more discussion we need to have on the south side here.
Well, and I would ask too, and maybe this is asking too much and too early, but maybe what a quad versus duplex unit might look like in terms of an ordinance. Ideally, the scale of green space versus building size versus parking and just what that site plan might look like would be very helpful so that we can kind of decide it feels good up to, whatever street, right? I think that would help us place like that transition point. Does that make sense?
So maybe snag a couple model duplex or quadplex designs.
Well, I know what they look like, but
Yeah.
I'm wondering what the lot,
Well, yeah, site
what our
design,
capacity might
full-
look
yeah.
like, yeah. Like how much green space do we want? How much
Yeah.
of a setback do we want? And that might help us with the natural transition feel as we're moving down 14 or
Yeah.
Main, if that
We
makes
could-
sense.
I think we can do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're
And,
looking at lot coverage as one of the controls for that.
right, sorry. This is obviously a module, right? And so there is still this idea that we are coming up with ideas to potentially revise the master plan, but within each module, such as this redevelopment, we are supposed to have an open house for the public, right? So we could present these ideas once we kind of finalize them next time.
Right.
And then be able to talk with residents again, or anybody who wants to join that, because I think that would be good before obviously making any, final revisions to the master plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we're not locked in at this point to anything, we're just still working on ideation, yeah,
Right.
okay.
Yep. Okay, do you want to save that for next? Yeah, okay. I think that's it for tonight then, in terms of the corridors, so,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Moving along to agenda item number 9 is the election of officers and discussion of the bylaws. Usually we have runners here to be the proletariat, or whatever they call them.
The parliamentarian?
Parliamentarian, yeah.
I'm not certified, but I can serve as that. I know that there's 6 of you here tonight out of the 9. I don't know if it's something you still wanted to entertain without having the full board to select a chair, vice chair. That's obviously up to the 6 of you. If you want to just proceed with the current positions in place or to revisit this next meeting.
sorry, but I think last year, we kind of liked to have a full,
We postponed it last year,
Yeah.
we put it off for 2 weeks. Right now, Richard Scott contacted me. His term expired December 31st of last year, and he couldn't make it to this meeting anyway. He had business out of town, and he wanted to know, and I said, I'm going to have to get back to you, but as far as the rules are, until he's replaced, he's still a viable member of this, so he will be back. But there's been a couple of people that we haven't seen for a while. I haven't kept track of who's been missing meetings offhand. Let's see,
Bitzer hasn't been,
Fitzer and Kobler were both missing at the last meeting we had.
Over here tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
let's get rid of that Kohlberg guy.
and we lost the one fellow, yeah, he never really announced that he was leaving or anything else, but he just seems to
He
be
is
gone.
officially off the board?
Yes.
Or the
Okay.
Yeah, apparently he quit, but he didn't notify
Okay.
anybody of
Yeah, I
that.
didn't know.
And I think.
So do we have an open seat? Or was that filled by Mr. Tinlin?
One was filled,
His was filled, there's a full complement with the 3 absences if they were here. Yes, there's a full board.
right. Unless Mr. Brian Kobler.
Right, Mr. Colbert's here.
No, I got it wrong. I'm-
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the.
Fitzer is the board member you're thinking of.
We've heard from him though,
He
right?
shared with me today that he had a work meeting that he had to be at tonight.
Because he's overall been pretty much consistent.
Yeah, it's just nice
Prior
that they
to.
checked in beforehand so we know that we have a full house or
Yeah.
not. I'll
Who's
leave
our-
it up to the,
Who's our secretary? I'm sorry.
Oh, who was our secretary?
It was.
Oh, we lost our secretary.
So we don't have a current
Yeah.
secretary.
You're vying for the job?
we
No,
we told-
I'm going to be taking some time off with the birth of my first child. So I was.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So I'm
When
gonna
is
hopefully, February 14th.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's going to be a Valentine's baby, huh?
Yeah, so I don't want to put my name forward for anything. I'm
But
actually
you know,
comfortable with the current
secretary is
position.
very intensive.
Yeah.
I think when we
Signing
lost,
documents.
when we lost Nate, I think we talked Richard Scott into taking the secretary
That
position.
what happened last
Yes.
time? Okay, so we do have a current secretary, okay.
He was filling that.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I mean, or the rest of the planning commission feels. I'm comfortable with the current appointments, if it makes it easier.
I'll
We
leave
can
it up to vote. Do you guys want to have a vote tonight, or do you want to put it off and wait for more people to show up?
I always like to have a full board, but if that's impossible, I don't know if, you'll be here for another meeting before.
least one more,
maybe.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope.
It's been kind of quiet to the right over there.
Always quiet.
I don't mind. I don't mind to vote tonight or postpone it.
We're just
Pleasure of the chair.
We're just short 3 votes. I personally, I don't really care.
If you don't care, let's do it tonight then.
I'll do it. Okay, let's do it. You want to start us, or?
Well, is there any nominations for chair?
So we have to move that way?
Do we have to make that in a motion to do it tonight, or
We have to
no?
make a
No, because it's on the agenda to do it anyway. So if you were not to do it tonight, you'd make a motion to postpone it to the next regular scheduled meeting, vote on that item if
Okay.
that was seconded.
So we don't have to make I saw just here on a potential motion, we don't have to say I move to be elected as it's on page.
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
So we do have to do that. Okay.
if that'll take a motion and a second. And then if
For the
there's,
nomination?
if,
No, I don't think so.
well, if you're
To nominate?
Nominate, and then you vote.
nominated and then you vote,
That's it.
but
You
it
don't
needs a
need
second.
I remember this
Beauty
being
is-
difficult last time, yeah.
It was.
Sorry?
I remember this being difficult last time. I think
Yeah, it
we
was-
don't need to, you can nominate anybody, and then obviously for appointments, you have to vote.
Correct.
Yeah.
But you don't need a second.
Yes, I was the
Yeah.
appointment process, yes.
Apparently you can nominate yourself.
Of course you can.
Yeah.
You can nominate yourself.
Of course you can.
So do you want to start with the chair first and then work our way down?
I'll throw my name in the hat for chair.
I'll second it.
Okay, I got a motion.
There's no seconding.
Well, there's not, yeah, no.
Oh,
we're just-
seconding. Oh,
we're
right.
seeing
I
if
forgot.
anybody
You
else
just went
wants
over
to
this
put their
already.
name in. Yeah,
It was only
Yeah,
a
there's
second.
that. There's a nomination, a vote, and then
yeah.
yeah.
All right, then.
Then we'll accept you with a second after the voting, right?
Well, now someone would have to make a motion to appoint Mr. Gusera.
We just need to roll over on the votes, that's all.
Okay, so we're good?
Yes.
We
Are
need
you a
attorney here.
parliamentarian?
We've done this 3 times, so I have a memory apparently.
We'll take it.
So you made that?
No, he made that.
Okay.
He nominated himself.
All right.
Chair nominated himself.
There's no motion yet. Anybody else nominating themselves for chair?
Doesn't work.
I think
like
you
that.
go through one by
You have
one.
to vote on the nomination.
Oh, you have to vote.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're voting on
let's vote.
Mr. Kucera's,
No, that became confusing last time we did it.
But they did, I think Rennis did say last
I
time.
think you have to be clear. When we did this years ago, whoever was doing that position, they said, okay, Greg Kucera is nominated for the chair. And you have to say it like 3 times.
3 times, yeah.
And that gives everybody the right to say, hey, I want the job too.
Okay.
If that happens, then you can split the votes. Yeah, you're right.
Right, I think you have to allow somebody else to oppose me if they wish to.
Sure.
So that's the way I've seen it done.
so do you want me to say that 3 times?
Yes, please.
All right.
Yes.
Officially.
Gregory Kucera has been nominated for the chair. Gregory Kucera has been nominated for the chair. Gregory Kucera has been nominated for the chair. Any other
Opposition?
nominations?
Okay, does that mean I get the job?
We get to vote.
We had
We
to
vote.
vote. Yeah.
Well, now we have to vote.
We can vote you down.
Okay, you guys make this difficult.
All right, Mr. Colbert,
I vote yes.
No, no motion.
yes motion?
There doesn't need to be a motion, does there?
There's no motion. We just need to vote yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin.
Yes.
We have this down next year. It's going to be very.
No, we won't. We're
Very
talking
good,
about-
very.
It becomes more fun each year. It keeps
So
changing
now
the
we'll
rules.
go to the vice chair, right?
That's correct.
I would like to thank you all for the position, appreciate it. Now, who wants to run for vice chair? You are currently.
I'll put myself in the hat for the
Vice chair.
vice chair. Yeah, I mean, yeah, rerunning for it. Vote for me.
All
I'll
right.
support that.
So Aaron
If
Remit,
you
Aaron.
need support.
It doesn't need support. We just vote,
But
right?
we're allowed to nominate two, because I'd also just like to recognize, to make it more interesting, is Laurent Nushai to the vice chair as well, since the service to the planning commission, because you're one of the longer standing people as well, right?
Yes.
Just to
Thank
make
you.
it interesting.
Thank you.
We have 2 nominations. Don't need support on either.
No.
Can we
So
make 3?
We vote on one at a time though, right?
Correct.
And you have to say it 3 times. No, you don't. I'm joking.
For
I'm joking. I'm just.
I'll do it.
joking.
All right, so the first vote will be for Aaron Redmond's nomination for vice chair. Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai,
No.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin,
No.
Mr. Colbert.
Yes.
All right, so that'd be 4-2. For continuity, we'll vote for Mr. Nushai as well. Mr. Tinlin,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
How does that work? I can't, no. So I already voted for somebody else, so I
Yeah.
can't say
Yeah.
yes. I have nothing against it, but no.
Ms. Redmond,
No.
Mr. Nushai,
Yes.
Mr. Kucera,
We are voting.
for Mr.
vice
Nushai
chair.
as vice chair, and you voted yes
I
for Ms.
understand the
Redmond.
point of that.
I just had
because
the
you
same
lost, yeah.
ethical
But I will
dilemma.
vote. I will vote no, but I don't understand the point of why we had the second vote.
Yeah, it wouldn't, shoot.
It's like you had
Automatically win.
2 horses in a race, and one wins, and the other one.
All right, well, we've got one more
Second
vote to wrap it up, so,
Okay.
Mr. Colbert?
No.
Okay, thank you. Aaron Redmond is the vice chair.
Congratulations. We made it interesting, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, had me on the edge of my seat.
Now, good luck, we need a secretary,
Right.
right? Anybody want to
Correct.
volunteer to be secretary?
Oh, right, and he's not here to accept
He's not here.
nomination.
Correct.
So we can't nominate him?
Can you nominate somebody that's not present? Do they have to
I
accept?
believe you can,
You'd
but.
have to have their approval that they would take the office,
That's correct.
yeah, so I don't think it's allowable, so I think we'd have to deal with whoever we have here. Or could we feasibly put it off until we have a full meeting, because it's a minor position anyway.
It's up to the board.
I'm-
Vote for it, and
I
if he
think-
refuses next time, we'll revise it.
And we vote him in even though he's not here? Sure. We do it at the Lions Club all the time.
And there you go.
This way you don't miss a meeting, right?
You try not to, yeah. Never know what
nominate
John's
Mrs.
gonna be when you get back, yeah.
All right. Richard Scott's been nominated for secretary.
Yes.
Yeah, does anybody want to make it
But
interesting?
don't you have to say it 3 times?
I was going.
Dylan, I
That
would
was
like to
number
make
one.
it interesting and put you up for the vote. Why not, huh?
I said, click your heels 3 times.
Yeah, we don't have to do that. We got an opposer,
Yeah.
says me.
And the scope, the secretary is only supposed to approve the minutes on a,
Not really.
not really?
Signed documents as needed.
Yeah, I read the.
I signed one
description.
when I was secretary.
All right.
Yeah.
You accept?
Sure.
I retract my nomination for Mrs. Scott.
All right.
Uh-oh. That
So
doesn't
then
make it
we'll
quite
go
fun.
through. Scott Tillman has been nominated for secretary.
Wait. Oh, okay, never mind, sorry.
You accept the nomination?
Yep.
All right. Scott Tillman has been nominated for secretary, and Scott Tillman has been nominated for secretary. Good for the vote. Mr. Colbert,
Yes.
Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, we have a.
It'll get easier next year, I
I'm gonna
promise.
Bring a roulette
try and
wheel
remember
next
that,
week. We'll just spin it and see. All right, what's with the discussion of the bylaws on here?
I just included that as part of the conversation. If anyone had any comments to the bylaws, just that way it's on the agenda if someone wanted to, has any problems with anything in the bylaws, to review them. That way it's done yearly. So if everyone's good with it, we can just move on.
I've carried a copy with me for a couple of years. This is effective as of November 24, 2020. That's the last time any changes have been made in this document?
Yes, as far as I know.
Okay, so this is the latest up-to-date one. Okay. Which I believe it's in the bylaws here that says that even if your term expires on this committee, unless you're replaced, you still hold a seat. I think that's the way it stands. So that's where it's going to have to stand with Mr. Scott.
And do they need to do we have to reapply when our term expires?
There is there's a form to do that, but I don't know that they really call upon that at mayor and council.
Do you know, Nick, if you're current a member, do you have to reapply formally?
There's just a one-page form that you fill out that
Yeah.
is essentially just showing that you're still interested in keeping that position.
Yeah, I've
And then
done-
how long, sorry,
every 3 years, I've filled out a form saying, yeah, I want to do it again.
I have two, I just didn't know if that was actually what you were supposed to do, I just do
Yes.
it, but like, is there a waiting period as they look at other applications before they say, or does yours get looked at right away?
It's kind of hard to answer that question right now because the city council is reviewing the appointment process.
Yeah.
So I can't really say one way or another. So when we have more direction from council, I'll be able to share that update with
Do you
you.
know if that's something they're considering? A standing member reapplies, do they stay in limbo until they try to find a replacement? Is that something that they're going to discuss, do you know?
I don't want to speak on behalf of the council.
Okay.
The current ordinance as it reads now is that both applications and reapplications are at the purview of the mayor. So it takes, she's the one that decides whether it comes to council or not, per the standard ordinance. So she can take 2 weeks or she can take 3 months.
It's up
So
to
she's the one that
her. Okay.
decides the nomination that'll go to the council vote by the current ordinance as it's written today.
She puts the name out and they have to vote to
Yep,
approve it.
yep. But she could have 12 applicants, could be a person reapplying for the role or a new one, but she's the one that decides the nomination that will proceed to council for vote.
And there was some discussion at council about more diversification, you know,
Yep.
so.
And the only one that's excluded from that is the ethics board, where any city council member can nominate a candidate to the city council and get it on the agenda. But all other boards and commissions goes through the mayor's office.
Oh, the ethics is different, huh?
Yep.
Hmm.
We found that out.
Okay. that's news.
Did I get it
Okay,
right, Nick? I probably read that ordinance a few times.
I believe so, but I know that they're talking about it
Yep.
right now, so I don't want to answer one way or another what they're intending to do, because I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, then we'll move on to agenda item number 10, which is.
I did have one question. I did read, Section 4, it does talk about attendance. Do we have the ability to take that out? Because I know we don't go by, if Section 4 said absence of a member from 3 consecutive scheduled meetings shall be grounds for removal of the member by the planning commission.
We've had to enforce that
Have we
before.
enforced it
yeah.
before? Okay. I was
With-
just curious, because we
Yeah.
had talked about,
Because essentially then, if a person leaves and they don't give us any heads up,
Okay.
we have no mechanism to replace them unless it's kind of, I've stopped showing up and that means I'm not going to come again, kind of thing. So the chair.
But if
I would
people
think-
miss 3 or 4 meetings in a row because of business, they
Yeah.
can't possibly make it as long as they notify us.
Right, right.
We try not to get rid of people because they're volunteers.
yeah, it's not a lot of volunteers out there. Because, courtesy of giving you advance notice so we know we have quorum, right? Okay.
Right, that's the main thing, yeah. Okay.
All right. That was my only question.
Okay. Agenda item number 10 is other business. Anything under other business? Nada. Planners report.
Nothing further.
Nothing on the planners report. Okay. Staff report and training opportunities.
I don't have a ton to add from the staff report that was in the packet. Just want to highlight that the homes on 14 Mile started to get demoed at the end of last week. So if you drive by, you'll see that I believe at this point 2, maybe the third one has gone down since then. And then we are requiring them to have some fencing around that as soon as possible once the equipment isn't coming in and out so frequently. So you'll see fence around that property hopefully very soon. And then I'm available for questions if anyone has
Are
any.
they going to take that brick house down too,
Yes. I wasn't cued in on their demo plans and timeline. I just know that it started,
or? Yeah. Okay.
but it is coming down.
Do you know, with the old limbs, it seems like we did that site plan a really long time ago, and it seems like it's being actively worked on, but it also seems like the exterior is taking an extensively long time to finish. Do we know what's going on? Is there issues there, or?
They had a site plan amendment for the facade where they changed the building material.
Yeah.
And then they've had the mason working on their front facade for the last while. I think they had some issues with getting material, getting the person scheduled there. So they're within their timeline with permitting and an open site plan.
They are within? and
They
it's-
are.
As long as they keep working on it, it stays open, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
limestone. It takes them quite a while to do the installation. Where did I see this? If you go to the temporary certificates of occupancy listing, apparently 288, 14 miles in the same thing, still being reviewed by administration, I understand that. If you go to the last one on there, 151 East 14 Mile, which is the Clausonian, and the dates seem to be odd on here. It says that the TCO was issued on November 11th of 2023, and then it expired January 8th of 2023.
That was the initial expiration date that we set in place. They completed what they needed to do beforehand.
Which was the initial?
So, because if, oh, yeah, that's a typo error. I apologize.
Yeah, you couldn't issue it in November of 23 and expire it in January of 2023.
It was meant to be 2024. That was last year when I was still on 2023 timeline, so I apologize.
Okay, that makes sense then. I don't know if anybody else here looked at Biscuits and Gravy, the rooftop screening units I mentioned one time. You should see it in the daylight. I don't know if anybody has. To me, it looks pretty atrocious. It's pieces of bent-up aluminum siding up there, and I'm surprised that our building department just, I guess there's no reaction. I guess we're waiting for their parking lot to go in. And I hate to get on their case, because I like the guys, and the food's great there. But as I walk past it all the time, they have now put a little screen tent out there. I assume it's for rain or snow for people. People are waiting a lot, so they don't want them to get wet, so they stand. But if you look at where they placed it, it's placed right at the handicap ramp access. You can't park a handicapped vehicle there and get past the tent to get into the building.
I'm in communication with them right now about that.
It's a poor placement for it. If they moved it to the other side of the door, it might make more sense.
Well, and they can't just pop that up out of
Can't-
nowhere either.
You can't just block a handicapped access.
Or just pop it up anyway,
Yeah, well,
right?
And
Can you?
we're working
Okay.
with them right now on that,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, a lot of restaurants have put up those little tents like that for smoking areas. They have them built on permanently.
But I think they get
I'm sure there's just a shelter just for rain or snow. I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure that's what they have it there for. Just the location is wrong with it. That's all I have on that. We have no legal update because we have no lawyer.
So Nick, you're working on them with the screening as well too, right?
Yes.
You said, okay.
Has anybody addressed the Valvoline oil change place on the corner? Crooks in Maine?
Oh, with
Their
the
atrocious
signage?
lights.
Their signs are something else too.
This
but-
is so blinding next to Paul's Car Wash.
What light are you referring to?
The surrounding,
The
On
surrounding
the
lights?
building, the
building.
actual
Okay.
building,
Their
right?
floodlights are just like,
if you're turning left from Crooks onto 14 Mile, it blinds you like really
Okay.
bad.
We'll take a look at that and see how it falls in line with our lighting standards and see what they need to do to address that.
And I believe they've probably changed their lighting. And I know they didn't have to come in front of us with the site plan because it was a continued use, but it would seem like if they changed lighting, that there is a mechanism to address that, right?
I don't know
There's
for
new
sure.
lighting when they switch.
There was new
Ownership.
lighting, yeah.
And I know that they've done a lot of signage that been on them because there was more, then there was less,
Oh,
and
yeah.
now I'm trying to work with them to make sure they're in compliance. I didn't realize that the lighting was that much of a nuisance, so we'll take a look at that.
Okay. No other comments. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
One more comment,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
As just an announcement that the Cost and Sustainability Committee is meeting tomorrow at 6 PM, and everybody's welcome, public and this board, anybody else. It's a small group, so we welcome, we welcome
What are you
anybody
guys
to
doing
join.
these days anyway? Like, can I ask?
Tune
is
in
that
at 6
okay,
o'clock
since-
tomorrow.
Huh?
Yeah.
Well, I know, but I mean, just as, you're our liaison, right? So, like, you've presented to us in the past, do you plan on having something, no pressure, but like, is there an ongoing update and presentation to us every year, right?
Yeah, I
Or-
don't know, Joe, if you have an update on when they may come in front of this committee again, or this.
Do we do that yearly, Joe?
Probably gonna be next month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been meeting regularly, like every other week, which is, a big cadence for us because they're finalizing, we're going through each of the action items that we kind of put forward. So hopefully
Cool.
there'll be something to present soon.
Yeah.
All right,
Make a motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion support. Roll call, please.
Mr. Nuchai?
yeah.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Solomon?
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Mr. Colbert?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was trying to actually read. Well, that's what it is. Is that involved that your physical safety?
I feel like that's an old thing that